are the women of SVLG.
We come from many different places.
We look very different from each other.
We all have unique talents
and abilities.
As women, we've all shared many of the same experiences.
And we want to let you know that one thing's for sure.
We share.
We share.
We share.
The same voice.
Our time.
Our time.
Our time is now.
Hello and welcome everybody to the Women's Leadership Summit from Silicon Valley Leadership Group, Mobilizing Our Power. My name is Shannon Diatley-Johnson. I am the Vice President of Events for the Silicon Valley Leadership Group. We are so excited to have you join us today, both virtually as well as in person. This is recorded, so you will be able to watch it at a later date as well. A few housekeeping items. We have 4 sessions today. They will have interactive audience Q&A sessions with each one. So as you're listening to the speakers talk, please do take the opportunity to submit questions for them. There will be a number to text on the screen during their session. Text your question. If you are comfortable, include your name. If you want, you can put your company, but shoot those. We have some staff that are vetting the questions, and then we will get those to the moderators to include in the session. So please be a part of the conversation. That's why we're here. We want to hear from you. Questions you have, what's important, or deeper dive into some of the context from the discussion. So please make sure you do that. I did want to say a big thank you to our sponsors, Blue Shield of California. Thank you so much for helping make today happen, as well as our venue host, Palo Alto Networks. This is a great campus, and we're thrilled to be here today. So thank you so much for that. And then with that, I'm going to pass it over to Elisa Coopersen. She's the operations manager for Palo Alto Networks. She's going to say a few words. Enjoy the program, have fun, and thank you for being supportive of us. Have a great day.
Thank you, Shannon, and thank you all so much for joining us, both in person and virtually. We're thrilled to have you here at Palo Alto Networks. As Shannon mentioned, I'm the Operations Program Manager, and it's also my privilege and pleasure to help lead our Women's Network community. We are so excited to be hosting what's sure to be an impactful and inspirational inaugural event, so thank you. Here at Palo Alto Networks, inclusion is one of our core values. At the Women's Network, as well as through our employee networks across the globe, we want to believe that people have a sense of community and can come to work and be inspired and feel heard and valued. Our Women's Network was the first and is our largest employee network group. We are over 1,500 members strong, and we have chapters in the Americas, in Europe, and in APAC. Our tagline for our Women's Network is Connect, Empower, and Inspire. And I do believe all of you will be connected, inspired, and empowered today at this event. So without further ado, I would like to introduce today's first speakers. They will be doing a conversation on leadership philosophy. It will be led by Lisa Davis, Senior Vice President and Chief Information Officer of Blue Shield of California. Lisa is driving Blue Shield, a $22.9 billion nonprofit insurance company which serves 4.8 million members and has 7,800 employees, toward a future state of healthcare, transforming the IT business, operating model, and leveraging digital technology, data, and analytics to improve the member and provider experience. Lisa holds a Master of Science degree in Human Resource Management from Golden Gate University and a Bachelor of Science in Computer Engineering from Syracuse University. She's a champion of gender equality and diversity in the workplace, getting girls involved in STEM subjects early, and the importance of women supporting each other, especially women in tech. Leadership philosophy will be moderated by Lisa Simpson-Rockwerger, Director of Digital Member Experience at Blue Shield of California. I would like to welcome them both to the stage. Thank you, and enjoy the afternoon.
Thank you. thank you for having us. Lisa, you've built your career in IT across all different sectors in government and academia and tech. What brought you to healthcare?
Healthcare, wow. I had the opportunity, certainly when I was at Intel, running a P&L for data center group, to really work with healthcare companies, hospitals, genomic companies globally. And it doesn't take a lot of rocket science to figure out that healthcare has always kind of been a laggard when it comes to digital transformation. And I wanted to have an impact. You know, I had spent 5.5 years at Intel. I was trying to determine what that next right opportunity for me was and where I could have the biggest impact, bringing my experience and knowledge to the table. But it was also some personal decisions too. I had been working like a dog, you know, traveling globally extensively, extremely busy. My youngest was going to become a senior in high school, and I wanted to be home more. And Blue Shield of California was primarily California-based. It removed all that global travel that I was doing so I could be more home with my daughter, Alexandra. And who knew, when I joined Blue Shield of California, literally 1 week later, I had to take the company completely remote over a 4-day weekend. So my entire ramp until recently into Blue Shield of California has been virtual. Building relationships, driving transformation, cultivating, building relationships in order to get things done. One person said to me, well, you can put on your resume now, you're a virtual CIO. I'm like, I don't know if I want that on my resume, right? I don't know if this is a good thing. So it's finally great to meet folks like Elisa here and to meet my teams and to be back in person now that we've just opened up kind of hybrid in the company.
It's been fun to see you in action, putting the technology into place. What are some other examples that you might be able to share of how you're using technology to transform healthcare?
We're actually starting at the beginning, starting with moving from an on-premise environment, leased data centers, and even though cloud's been around for 15 years now, cloud technologies, we're actually migrating our entire infrastructure to the cloud. Data is at the heart of our strategy, building a really differentiating experience with the data platform in the cloud. And what's exciting about that experience, part of what we want to do at Blue Shield of California, and I think we can all agree, being members or members of other payers, is the healthcare experience is not what it should be. We believe in a healthcare experience that is personalized, it's holistic, it's high tech and high touch. We're in control of our decision making in healthcare. Part of the data platform that we're building is where we would be able to share information with obviously the right privacy and security controls between you, the member, your doctors, and the payer. Imagine if we were all looking at the same data. And it shows that when folks are involved in their decision making, they get better health outcomes. Not only do we get better health outcomes because you're involved, you're engaged, you're sharing, you're aware of all the information. I don't know about all of you, but I have different doctors, and all the doctors don't share information with the other doctors, and I mean, it's craziness.
Amazing how bad it is.
Right? It's so bad. So that experience that we as consumers expect in retail, in our banking, in this day and age, we need that same experience in healthcare. And that's what excites me about the mission and vision of what we do at Blue Shield of California. And one of the reasons, in the first question you asked me, I came because that vision and that mission really resonated with me in terms of where I could have impact.
That's why I'm here too. I'm wondering if you could share with the audience a couple of examples of like what that tangibly means that you've done in the last year or two.
Yeah, well, it's a lot. You know, I had the pleasure of serving actually with Elisa on the vaccine task force last year. So Blue Shield of California was partnered with California state government. Our job was to accelerate vaccine distribution in the most equitable way across the entire state. So frankly, I was honored to be able to serve in that capacity and to really help the state. Elisa was a key part of that as well in terms of the work that we did together. You know, we're constantly driving that member experience. It's the end of the day is what is that experience that we can provide to our members, as well as the doctors, the providers that serve across all of our networks. So improving that member and provider experience, frankly, making it easy for providers to do their job. We're doing such things as using natural language processing when a physician or your provider captures those notes electronically, goes right into the electronic health record, right? So that you reduce that overhead on our providers so that we actually have more time with our doctors versus, 15 minutes, next, in terms of how we're working with each of our providers. So that's an example of what we're doing. We're trying to do, and we've just delivered a technical capability on real-time claims. Imagine if you didn't get a piece of paper in the mail that you didn't understand what it said anyway, of what you were covered for and what was the service that you received. And you actually went into a provider or hospital, you understood the service, you knew the cost of the service, you were able to settle or pay for that service based on your insurance plan in near real time. It would reduce over, I think it's $250 billion in the healthcare industry based on overhead, and it's all about ultimately reducing the cost of healthcare in this country. So that's an example. We're also starting virtual care. Most people want, since the pandemic, to be able to have a virtual appointment with a provider that can be very easily addressed and then follow up appropriately, have an integrated set of doctors that they can communicate, that they understand who Elisa is, what is she being treated for, what is her current state of health, and have that holistic representation and engagement from our providers in doing that. So there's so many things as we drive transformation in healthcare. There probably isn't an area that's not being addressed in terms of ultimately improving that provider and that member experience and transforming how we get healthcare today.
So shifting gears a little bit, it's hard to do this work in healthcare. And one moment I saw you in action, I think there was a room full of men and they didn't want to all send you data and integrate with it in the vaccine world. Yeah. And I'm curious, what are some of your experiences that have impacted how you lead and what your leadership style is in what can be a male-dominated environment?
I'm usually in a room full of men. So this is great that I'm in a room full of women, which I love here. No, and thank you to our male allies that have joined us. I mean, I grew up, frankly, literally, I grew up in Department of Defense. I was a high school senior that started working for the federal government. The federal government was trying to recruit engineers. My father found the ad in the paper, bless his heart, and said, wow, this looks like a really interesting job for you. And I'm thinking, Lakehurst Naval Air Engineering Center with a bunch of old, bald-headed men doing COBOL programming. Yeah, Dad, sign me up for that. It's totally it. What was interesting is that every summer, every spring break, I would work, every winter break. I never went to the Bahamas or any, big spring break, never had that opportunity to do that. And then right out of college, you were on an accelerated, because the government starts at GS2, goes up to GS15, and then there's senior executive service members. Well, I started as a GS2, and every year I came back, I would go to the next grade level, and then if I decided to stay with the government, then I would be on an accelerated promotion. So long story short, after I graduated, I said, I'm not working for the government. I was going to go work for an IBM or an HP, a big tech company. And then I married a Navy guy. Our first duty station was Guantanamo Bay, Cuba.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. wow, my parents are like, she's lost her mind. I graduated in May, I was married in October, and in January I'm in Gitmo. And I'm thinking, what the hell did I just do?
Yeah.
Needless to say, I'm no longer married to that guy, but needless to say, I wound up spending 26 years in the Department of Defense, and I'm really proud of the fact that I started as a student, high school student, GS2, and I retired as a senior executive service member, which is equivalent to a 4-star admiral or general. Right. And that's a journey. That is definitely a journey. So what did I learn from that experience? I was always the only woman in the room. There's a great movie with Jessica Chastain in it. I think it's a Black Hawk Down, but it's about 9/11 and catching Osama bin Laden. And she shows a scene in the government where, of course, you come in as the woman and all the men are gathered around the table. And what does she do? She takes the seat in the back of the room. But she's the one that has the intelligence and the information as to what needs to be done to actually catch Osama bin Laden. Anyway, haven't seen the movie. Great movie. So I learned I had to be, first of all, I had to be very direct. I had to be able to communicate, but most importantly, I had to be really good at what I did. So I had to develop an expertise that I was respected for the expertise that I brought to the table. And in that movie, what is paralleled is that is in fact what that character Jessica did. She was an expert in her field. So one of the ways that I kept moving forward, all in technology and Department of Defense, but on the intelligence side of the house, was I became very good at what I did, and I delivered results. So it's about execution, and it's about results. And you get comfortable and confident in finding your voice, being able to articulate and speak to that, and then the kind of sex in the room, not the sex in the room, the men, you know, you're no longer, oh, well, she's just the woman. Oh, no, we need to have Lisa now at the table because Lisa's now the expert at the table as to what we're doing. So that very much shaped me in terms of the leader that I wanted to be. I certainly saw lots of examples of the leader I didn't want to be. And I had to learn, observe, understand how to have impact, how to be able to drive transformational change. And while I was in government, you know, working my way up the ranks in almost every area in technology, infrastructure, help desks, mission systems, application development, deputy CIO, until I became a CIO. And I was a CIO in counterintelligence. I can't tell you anything because I'd have to kill you all. You know, that's the standard line. And then a CIO at the U.S. Marshal Service, which was a fascinating job before I retired. When I left, my next adventure was the CIO at Georgetown University in academia, Department of Defense and academia.
Oh, little different.
My goodness, yeah. Consensus-driven decision-making. The students were fabulous, so bright. Started Women Who Code at Georgetown University and then started the chapter in Washington, D.C. But that was a completely different experience of incredible academics, different type of leadership in academia, male-dominated, primarily all male CIOs. Left after 3 years, that was enough. Was recruited to come to Intel. Male-dominated, very few women. So each of those experiences have shaped me in terms of what is most important to me as a leader. And what's important to me is alignment to core values, being authentic, being honest, having integrity. That's how I want to be treated. That's how I try to treat others, and that's how I build a team. Being very open and direct and transparent in terms of what are we doing, how are we going to get there, what does success look like, and how can I help you be successful? And that is how I view my job, is developing the leaders around me and folks that I mentor and folks within the organization of how do I get them to their next goal? What is it that you aspire to be? And that's probably one of the things I'm most passionate about as a leader.
So you talked a little bit about sort of developing an expertise and becoming really good at what you do. What are some of the other skills that you've had to learn or hone over the years?
Well, and I think we have a variety of leaders from different sectors in the room. So being a technology leader today is being a business leader. Every company today is a tech company, tech and data company. So no matter what company you're in, what sector you're in, having that knowledge of data and technology is really important in order to continue moving forward in your career. In addition to those skills, I always think of a triangle as you continue to move up the ladder. You need to have your expertise, and in my case, it was technology leadership, and I got very broad in terms of moving into that leadership role. You also need to have financial acumen. So you need to have financial acumen as you continue to move forward, so you need to add that in. And then you need and absolutely must have business acumen, right? So those business acumen skills and knowing what the business is doing, what are the strategic goals of the company, how are you going to help drive to those business outcomes? That is my job as a technology and business leader, and that financial acumen and skill sets. But you also need those interpersonal skills. The soft skills are really important, and that's what's been so hard during the pandemic. I mean, we're all exhausted being on Zoom calls, at the start of the day until the end of the day. So how do you communicate your vision? How do you inspire others to want to follow you and get on the bus with you on that particular vision that you have articulated to your team? So soft skills, written skills, verbal skills, the ability to communicate and get comfortable at doing that are all part of kind of building that portfolio and building that package so that you can continue in whatever your goals are.
Awesome. So can you talk a little bit around, I'm sure it all hasn't been rainbows. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the challenges you face along the way and any advice you have for those who might be facing their own challenges?
What do you mean? It's not just all rainbows? No, it's never a rainbow. I literally, every role that I've been in, and certainly in a leadership role, there are challenges. And those are challenges that frankly need to be viewed as opportunities. And the name of the game for me, and why I think I've continued to be able to do what I love to do and try different roles, it's perseverance. You persevere. When you get knocked down, you pick yourself up and you go back at it again. You learn from your failures. You learn where the struggles were from. You learn from difficult relationships or conversations that you have, and you apply that to the next time that you will have them again. You will have them again. So it is staying true to yourself and your core values of what is most important to you. It is continuing to persevere and pick yourself up when those challenges present themselves, and they will always, no matter, it's not always greener on the other side, it's just a different set of opportunities and challenges that you'll be dealt with, and you keep moving forward. And I think it's really important, and us that work, we have so many different roles that we play. Mother, daughter, sister, oh my goodness, coach on the outside, and then you're working full time. So we have to be many different things to many different people. The more you surround yourself with a network of family and friends and colleagues that support you, that are there to pick you up when you're not having a very good day, that are going to encourage you to keep pursuing your dreams. You can't, it's not that you can't, it's just really hard to do it by yourself. So whether it's a partner, whether it's a spouse, whether it's a friend, whether it's a colleague, I always talk about kind of building your own board of directors.
We call that village in my family.
Yeah, or building a village. But if I was going to create my own board of directors, who would I place on that board? To keep me grounded, to bounce off things from. I'm not really having a really great day here, and I'd love to get your thoughts of, this is how I'm thinking about it. What am I missing? How are you thinking about it? So create that board of directors, create that village. And I've been lucky enough to be married 23 years. I have 3 incredible children. My oldest is 32. My son is a senior in college. He's 21, unbelievable. And my youngest is a sophomore in college at NYU. I have an incredible husband who is a full partner in allowing me to do the job that I do. If toilets need to be cleaned, he's cleaning the toilets. Laundry needs to be done, he's doing laundry. Kids need to be picked up from the soccer game, he's picking them up. And we look at each other and say, because he works full time, oh, I remember when the kids were little and you have a 3-year-old. I know you go through this, right? Oh my God, they're not feeling good today. Who can stay home? Oh, I got a meeting at 10 o'clock. Oh, I got a really important meeting that I got to be at 1 o'clock. And it becomes this ruthless prioritization of where you need to be and how you manage through that. Because it is never in balance. Never, don't let anybody ever tell you that. There is no such thing as perfect balance. It is ruthless prioritization of where you need to be.
That is how I try to manage my household.
It's hard.
It's
It
hard
is
work.
hard, yes.
So last question, then we'd love to open it up to the audience to take some questions as well. But you've dedicated so much of your time, and today's such a nice example of creating awareness of the need for diversity in tech, and how can every one of us sort of help support that mission?
It is a call to action. Women are at, in the labor force, the lowest level since 1988. You've all heard of the Great Resignation. Hopefully you've heard of the Great Secession. I mean, there was tremendous learnings through the pandemic. Many, many women left because of taking care of parents, taking care of kids, all the reasons of what we've all endured to try to get to the other side of the pandemic. We have 25% of diversity in women in technology, which is why you do not see a lot of role models of CIOs. Nor a lot of CEOs, and women in the C-suite in general. So we were making slow progress, and now we've basically pushed back, I don't know, I forgot what the number was. It'll take 50 years or something to get back to the levels that we were at. It is a call to action. I mean, look what's happening politically. I mean, we're in crazy town right now in terms of things that are happening politically as well, but we're not going to go there. In terms of women's rights and women in leadership roles and women in the C-suite and women on boards. And, one of the things I'm really proud of at Blue Shield of California is we have 50% diversity at the senior leadership level of women. And diverse talent. We have equal pay and parity between men and women. And we have the first female board chair in our 88-year history in terms of our board of directors. That's impressive stuff. And I got to tell you, coming to healthcare, one of the things I love in healthcare is I see more women. More women in healthcare than any other sector that I have worked in. And that has been a real blessing.
It has. It's really cool to see. It's one of the things that attracted me to Blue Shield.
Yeah.
So we have a few pre-submitted questions, but I'd love to open it up if there's any questions from the audience. Yeah.
Lisa, thank you for mentioning about women who left the workforce and are trying to return to work, because I know you have a huge sort of you're championing a program where women can actually return to work on internships.
Yes.
And that is such a key to bring those 2.5 million women back into work.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, absolutely. There has to be diverse HR policies that allow women to return to the workplace, to be able to accommodate the schedules that they have. Frankly, our daycare facilities are not back 100% as they were prior to the pandemic. So there's all of these factors. And, you know, at the end of the day, yes, the job is important, but your family. Family is number one for me, taking care of our families. And it's hard to be focused and dedicated and successful in the office when something else is lingering in the back of your mind of, oh, you know, how's my child doing? How's my mom doing? All these other things that we have on our plate. So those diverse HR policies in terms of bringing back women is incredibly important.
So another question we just got is, you know, as you've grown as a leader and transitioned out of doing as an individual contributor and into more of a leadership role, how did you find space to make that transition to coaching and relationship building?
Yes, space and time are always a challenge because we live in a meeting culture world. I mean, if we would allow it every hour, every minute of my day, I would be sitting in a meeting. So one of the things I always folks that I coach and mentor is, if you don't set boundaries for yourself, no one else will do it for you, right? So you have to set those boundaries in terms of managing your day, managing your schedule. Obviously, the more senior you go, I can say, unless my boss is scheduling a meeting, no, I'm not going to take that meeting at 7:30 in the morning. Are we at war? What happened? What is so important that we come into a meeting at 7:30 in the morning? So setting those boundaries, taking time for health and wellness, and taking an hour during the lunch hour, putting those boundaries away so you can think. We need time to think. And as a leader, it's creating that capacity to allow me to, my job is supposed to be think strategically, you know? So I kid around with, you know, so I'm not sitting there with my feet up eating bonbons. I mean, I am supposed to be thinking of what we're doing for the next 3 to 5 years. You need space and capacity to do that, so you have to create it. And I do that on my calendar. And then you need that space in order to do things that my job is to develop the leaders around me. So that development and coaching to help them, they all want to be CIOs, which I think is awesome. And that's one of the things that I love doing. So if you don't create that space and capacity, and it's always a challenge, and there's times when, yes, we just had a 7-hour meeting with the boss. There's not a lot of space and capacity in there to do other things. And you surge through those periods where you need to surge and meet a deadline, but then you need to get back to taking control of my calendar, my time, making time for yourselves and health and wellness so that you can be the best that you can be. Can't be the best mom, can't be the best employee, can't be the best leader if you're not taking care of yourself. So I'm hugely passionate about that.
So I think last question is, what leaders have inspired you, and what have you learned from other women in the executive ranks?
Has anybody watched the show First Ladies?
No.
I highly recommend it. Little did I know that Eleanor Roosevelt was a badass. Right? So they showcased Eleanor Roosevelt, Michelle Obama, and Betty Ford, another badass. And I learned so much. I already knew Michelle Obama was badass. So how strong. So what's incredible about those role models, another role model is Condoleezza Rice, right? Just incredibly intelligent, integrity, smart, you know, just articulate in terms of how she engaged with her people, how she did her job. So I think in the more role models we have, in terms of, well, what does it mean to be a female leader? You know, I talk a lot about authentic leadership. Authentic leadership doesn't mean you're soft. It doesn't mean that you don't get results and you don't accomplish and execute what you're supposed to. It means that you care about the people that you're working with, that you're invested in their success, that you're open and direct and transparent with your team, whether they want to hear it or not, because it's delivered with the right intent and the right purpose of keeping and helping them moving forward. So those are some of my role models of women, and just watching and observing and how they handled situations is what kind of shaped my own thinking.
Awesome. Well, Lisa, thank you for your service. Thank you for your service to Blue Shield and for being here today. And thank you all for your questions.
Yeah, thank you all.
Hi, I'm Sonu Ratra, co-founder of Akraya and founder of Women Back to Work and the chairwoman of the Silicon Valley Leadership Group Foundation Board. I invite all of you to sign up for the upcoming 18th annual Applied Materials Silicon Valley Turkey Trot on Thanksgiving Day. The Turkey Trot raises funds for 4 charities: Second Harvest of Silicon Valley and Santa Cruz, the Healthier Kids Foundation, and the Health Trust. This year's race is in person, and as we work in a virtual and hybrid world, the Turkey Trot offers an opportunity for companies to bring employees, your teams, and their families and your own loved ones together in a meaningful way, while of course having fun and burning those calories you are going to eat on Thanksgiving Day. Join the Fittest Firm competition, the costume contest, or the kids fun run. There is something for everyone. So I hope you sign up soon. Thank you, and I look forward to seeing you all there.
Good afternoon. My name is Bonnie Sheikh, and I am the Executive Assistant to SVLG CEO Ahmad Thomas. I'm very pleased to be here to introduce our first panel entitled Modern Work Hurdles, H-E-R-D-L-E-S. Over the next 45 minutes, you will hear from a group of women who are tackling the issues and obstacles we continue to face in the modern workplace. Our first panelist, Erica Padilla Chavez, is CEO of Second Harvest Food Bank in Santa Cruz County. She has spent her career fighting inequity in California and beyond, and leads an organization responsible for feeding over 75,000 people in Santa Cruz County every month. Joining Erica is Assemblymember Buffy Wicks, who represents California's 15th Assembly District. She has spent her tenure breaking down the barriers that women in political office face, and is one of the most visible legislators in California. Our third panelist is Clotilde Hewlett, also known as Chloe, Commissioner of the California Department of Financial Protection and Innovation. As the head of California's financial regulator, she and her department enforce the state's business laws and protections for consumers. Rounding out our panel is Patty Hatter, Chief Customer Officer at Palo Alto Networks. In her role, she helps one of the leading and innovative Silicon Valley companies with their goal of challenging and actively changing the lack of diversity across the tech industry. And moderating our discussion is Rhonda Johnson, President of AT&T California and a member of SVLG's Board of Directors. Welcome to all our panelists, and enjoy. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm thrilled to be here, especially sitting up here with such distinguished ladies who do amazing things, have had amazing careers, and are here to share some of their perspectives with all of us. So we'll have some time at the end for questions, but we're going to kick into the gear right away. I'm going to ask each one of these ladies a question to start off, and then we'll follow up with an individual question for each of them. Okay, jumping in. In this discussion today, we're going to learn a lot about women in the workplace and your journeys over time. In the last month, U.S. women saw a major gain in the labor force participation. In your own opinion, what do you think should be employers' main focus to avoid a risk of retention if structures aren't put in place to ensure that women stay? And I'll start with Patty.
Great. I think it's great to see things ticking up. I think there is some positive out of the pandemic because it forced people to start to think about things a little bit differently. And I know we have here at Palo Alto networks, but flexibility of work, not having to be in the office 5 days a week, and really thinking about what are the benefits, what's important to folks. And I think that will be even more important going forward as organizations, individuals have gotten used to it. So I think the flexibility and the balance between companies' needs and individuals' needs will be really important. And we started a sort of a foundational platform around our FlexWorks to really embed that in how we do business across Palo Alto in each geography. And that's really taken hold of sort of building in the flexibility and the benefits. So hopefully that'll be something that we see other companies comfortable in doing also.
We all have to adapt, right? Changing times. Claude.
I would second all of that, mainly because I'm a strong believer, if you really want to support women, then don't put them in the position where they have to make a choice between their families and their career. This is why you'll hear me say telework, telework, telework. Because I think it's very important, particularly for women at certain points in their career, when they choose to have children, a family, or when they have to take care of elderly parents or sisters and brothers for a medical condition, that they have employers that are going to be understanding and give them the full support during that period, even if they have to take off or even if they have to have a reduced schedule. But most important of all, I think what we've learned through the pandemic is allowing them to work at home, and at some particular jobs, if they cannot work entirely at home, at least giving them the opportunity to have some days off during the week. I think if more employers gave that kind of support, we would find more women breaking that glass ceiling.
Definitely. Okay, for today, Assemblywoman Wicks, can we call you Buffy?
Of course, you can always call me Buffy.
Yeah. All right, Buffy, what about you?
Well, I'm going to echo some of these similar answers here. You know, and during the pandemic, I remember the December 2020 job numbers where it was 100% of the job loss was women and women of color. Women were hit hardest, and women of color were disproportionately impacted with this pandemic. So it's good to see the numbers coming back. I think there was some time where we thought, is this going to set the women's movement back decades? You know, and we'll see. Hopefully it doesn't. But those numbers coming back are good. You know, I actually ran a bill that would require employers to provide reasonable accommodation where it made sense for this type of flexibility. Now, it may be shocking that the business community did not support the bill, and it didn't make it through. I'm willing to go back and try it, but I'm hopeful that companies will do this anyway, because they know to keep employee retention, you have to provide these things. It's better for your employees. They're happier if they have some amount of flexibility. And we're just talking about, again, reasonable accommodation. Someone's sick, you know, and we've confronted this before. You know, wildfire smoke is heavy. The daycare is closed today because it's an outdoor facility. And what do I do with my 2-year-old? You know, there's any number of different things that kind of come up. And when you're a parent, and I know because I have a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old, and I deal with it in my current job as a legislator, you know, you have to have that reasonable accommodation. We also know that discrimination against caregivers is real. You know, 71%, I believe the number is, of parents have experienced, and mostly women have experienced, some form of discrimination, meaning they don't get, you know, the promotion. They're looked over for hiring purposes. When you say you have little kids in an interview, like employees are like, oh, red light, this person's going to be a nightmare to deal with, right? We have to overcome that so that these places are accepting, particularly for women, because women tend to be the primary caregiver, not always, but tend to be in their household, and increasingly the primary breadwinner. So it's important that we provide these types of flexibility, or we're going to regulate it, you guys. No. I hope that the employers will, on their own accord, do it, because, again, they know that it helps with employee retention.
Makes sense.
So the benefit of being last is that I can say ditto, ditto, ditto. But, you know, I'm going to be very practical in how I answer this. I represent a sector that is overwhelmingly represented by women, the nonprofit sector. Yet, when compared to male counterparts, female CEOs make, on average, 10% less than male counterparts. Obnoxious, right? And so to your question, Rhonda, we have to be intentional about looking at pay equity. And we need to be intentional about looking at our compensation structures. And this applies not just to the nonprofit sector. It applies to all companies, right? Because why? Because we're talking about economic power. A woman who has an opportunity to save up for retirement, a woman who is able to be compensated accordingly, comparatively to their male counterparts, can lean into a job. They can give it their all. And then, of course, all of these flexibilities that have been described by my colleagues up here just adds to that leaning in. So, but we have a very structural issue with gender pay gap, particularly hitting women hard, right? So I think we've seen movement in that regard with private companies. Many nonprofits are moving in that direction, and we just need to keep at it and not lose sight of that.
Makes sense. And as we sit here, I mean, the name of this panel is, you know, modern work hurdles, right? And we're all talking about mobilizing and making sure that we use our power, and in the workplace, make sure we make our voices heard. And that makes a lot of sense. Okay, now, Patty, I have a question for you. And you have amazing stats here at Palo Alto Networks, and you're really walking the walk here. Your executive team has increased to 27% females. And your new hires from the 2020 graduating class comprised of 52% women.
Right.
What is Palo Alto Networks doing to bring more female applicants, and what are they doing to help support them and make them want to stay and be successful here?
Right. And the numbers are very strong, and we're very proud of those. And it starts in the whole process, even when you're recruiting people. How do we make sure that we get a full slate of diverse candidates into these interviews in a time frame that is meaningful, that they're not just a check in the box, yeah, we need somebody, you know, that's a little different, but really meaningfully looking for these candidates. And we've really focused on that, and we've seen that shift our numbers. But then you have to retain them. And we've seen in a lot of the tech companies in Silicon Valley, we lose a lot of director level, across the valley, lose a lot of director level females that are like, I'm stuck and I don't know what to do. I just don't feel like I have the support. So at Palo Alto, the very first we call them employee resource groups, but they're communities of interest across the company. Our very first was in for females, and it's not just only females. It's the whole group of interested people, male, female, anything of how do we help the mentorship, the sponsorship of this community. And for Palo Alto Networks, we're over 10,000 employees. We have over 1,500 employees that are in our women's ERG, Employee Network Group. So it's a very strong contingent. And then the beauty of that is, because I've sponsored some other employee resource groups, is that women's group ends up being the leader to help foster the others. And then you have that much more camaraderie, sponsorship, knowledge of each other. So that's super helpful. And I think one of the things that we've been able, that community of spirit, how do we move forward? You know, how do you take, I'm a technical female, how do you get past some of your let's double check the homework, am I really qualified for these different jobs? You have a community that's really lifting you. So I think that's helped us not just hire at a much bigger proportion than other companies, but actually retain those females.
It makes a lot of sense. The employee resource groups can be really a wonderful and value add for employees when they start. And if you have the women's group, then they have a collaborative they can work with.
Right. Some place to go and ask questions that you wouldn't necessarily want to talk to your boss about or the rest of your group about. It's a real community.
That's great. That's great. Okay, I'll go to Buffy next. Okay, in 2020, you went viral for bringing your 1-month-old little one to the floor. I remember this.
Right, yes, good job, Mama.
You helped to show the world that, yes, women really can do it all. And here we are now 2 years later. As you mentioned, you have a 2-year-old. Have you seen any real changes in the laws that assist new parents in the workplace? And, what do we still need to do? What has to be done?
Yeah, so that was, I did not anticipate going viral. I just was like 4 weeks post C-section and ironically came up because I needed to vote on a bill to expand paid leave. And it was 140 votes. And I was vote number 41, which put it over the top. And I, in fact, had tried to remote vote and was denied for a number of reasons. But anyways, I said, okay, I'm coming. I'm bringing my baby because she's eating every 2 hours. I can't leave her at home. And then there you go. There you have it. But so it's ironic that I was voting on that bill. So that has helped, right? Expanding paid leave. But we still need to do a number of things. I mean, I think the pay gap thing is huge. And again, it disproportionately impacts women of color. Black and brown women are impacted more on this issue, on the pay gap issue, than white women. So that needs to fundamentally be addressed. The other thing is the cost of childcare is so expensive. And so you have women leaving the workforce because the cost of childcare is so expensive. And when that happens, when they come back 5, 6, 7 years later, their male counterparts are here in the chain of command, and then they're coming right back here again. And so this is part of the problem as well. And, like in my district, it's cheaper to send my daughter to University of California, Berkeley than it is to afford preschool. And that's just normal average preschool, right? This isn't like fancy, this is just like childcare, right? So that's just insanity and needs to be fixed. And we as a society need to say that that's something that we value. So I think that's important. And then the other thing is the pay rate needs to be increased for leave, especially if you're a low wage worker. If you're going to take a cut of 40%, and that means you're not going to be able to afford rent, you're not going to take leave. And a lot of our low wage workers take a week or 2 off and then they go back to work, or they come completely out of the workforce. So these are structural things that I think need to shift. My hope coming out of the pandemic is that we would really wrap our heads around this. I think there's been some changes. There needs to be a continuation of more. I got a bill on the governor's desk right now, which expands the definition of family, because also a lot of people aren't living in a, man, wife, child setting anymore. It's a dynamic world. So choosing who your family is so that when you need to take leave, you can do that, and expanding that definition to sort of modernize it, I think is also important. So we're working on a number of those things, but we still have a ways to go.
Well, I can speak for myself, and as women, I think overall, having you represent these issues and the work that you do in Sacramento really does make a difference. And it's nice to see so many women leaders in Sacramento.
Oh, thank you.
So, great. All right, let's see who's next on my list. Chloe, I'll go to you. You've spent the better part of your career being the only woman, the first woman, or one of few women in the workplace. As a prosecutor, there were very few women in the courtroom. As the executive director of the Cal Alumni Association, you were the second woman to serve in that position, not to mention the first woman of color. And now in your current role, you oversee the financial support of the state of California. What were some of the major hurdles that you came across in the male-dominated fields, and how did you overcome those?
Well, I'm going to answer in 2 parts. How I dealt with it in the early part of my career, and how I deal with things now as a 68-year-old grandmother.
So, you got some wisdom.
So in the early part of my career, and to give you some framework, early 70s, late 60s, particularly when I was one of the first women peace officers in law enforcement, it was during a time when San Francisco was under consent decree. Women were not allowed to drive police cars. That's why we were under consent decree and we were relegated to the desk. And so here I'm coming in the middle of this particular time. It wasn't covert discrimination, it was overt discrimination. And at that time, a lot because I had come up from extreme poverty, I didn't care what I faced. I was not going to be denied. So my strategy at that point in time was to be the very best that I could be. I was not going to be denied. And I was going to be strong and recognized and fearsome. So if you didn't respect me, you will fear me. And so I created my own board of directors, my own political network, so that when I was in the room and you didn't recognize me, my network would take care of you.
Oh my God.
But as I got knocked down so many times, I can't even give you the number. But each time, no matter what, through sheer will and perseverance, I got back up again. And I became a very strong, aggressive, outspoken person in which, yes, there were a lot of men that began to fear me and they respected me. But it was during the trip I took to Japan, and I met this very high-level leader in Japan, and she taught me the real power of soft power. Soft power. And I always had thought that soft power was a weakness, and I had trained myself on the hard power route. But when she taught me soft power, and I started using soft power, that's when I started making significant changes. And soft power is about moving the heart of your adversary, actually moving the heart of those that may not take you seriously or disrespect you. And as I've gotten more and more confident when I walk into a room now, I really look at how can I connect with that person's heart to make that systemic change that I want to see. And I think that's the most important change. And I have a lot more compassion when I walk into the room. And you can imagine when you're over financial services for the state of California and you have the power to affect the global economy and you walk into a room, I would say probably about 99% of the time you're the only woman. And, but I still, even with that, move it through more of a soft power as opposed to what I did early on in my career.
Oh, very interesting.
You're a badass.
Yeah.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, I agree. Very good. And lessons we can all learn from, too.
Yeah.
Okay, Erica.
Yes.
Congratulations on recently joining Second Harvest Food Bank. In your previous role, you took the organization from a staff of 20 serving about 2,500 children to 2 locations into a staff of over 65, serving over 7,000 students and families in 3 locations. What part do you see yourself playing in this new role now to ensure that there are less obstacles for a new generation of women entering your organization or, as you've talked about, nonprofits?
Yes, yes. Well, thank you. I just have to say, Chloe, thank you for sharing your story. Very, very impactful for me. You know, one of the things that I will say is that I talked about that pay, right? And so how is it that in my current role, I'm going to ensure that women, as they enter Second Harvest Food Bank, feel welcomed, feel accepted, and feel a place of belonging. And it starts with pay. Because I'm a big believer that compensation is the biggest manifestation, physical manifestation of any person's value, right? As an employee's value. And so I'm very intentional about making sure that we are addressing that, because it's frankly the first conversation you have with any new employee, right? What's the benefit package? What's the salary? So there's got to be some attention to that. And I want to say that at Second Harvest Food Bank, I walked into a situation where the board of directors that is woman-led was working on a compensation study and did just that for Second Harvest. So I was very fortunate that I came in and I signed off all those personnel action forms saying, guess what, folks? You all get a bigger paycheck, right? But, you know, no kidding aside, I think there is some focus on that. And so when it comes to women, it's important that we recognize that when we don't do this exercise maybe every 2 or 3 years, what are we doing to women if we already know that women in the nonprofit sector are falling behind? And that's true about all sectors, right? So that's I'm very practical when I think about what I can do with women. But then on a personal note, in supporting women, I have to think about me and my role as the CEO, as a woman of color leading an organization. And one of the things that I've discovered in my own journey in leadership is how important it is to find your voice, to know who you really are. Because I think, borrowing from Chloe's the before and after, early on in my career, I think I had an idea of what being a leader was all about. And I thought it was about being vocal, and it was about being seen, and it was frankly mimicking what I was seeing by my male counterparts in leadership positions, right? That didn't fare too good for me, right? I think one, because I was a woman, but I'm also a woman of color, right? And so I actually created more adversaries than I did supporters, right? And so I had to ask myself, what am I doing wrong? And 23 years ago, I took to journal writing because I wanted to figure out how to discover my voice. And it's through journal writing that I discovered who I am as a person. I'm a big believer in setting time to just be quiet and listen to yourself, and that's how I do it. And so, you know, as a leader now, I think it's important for me, now that I feel like I definitely have found my voice, that I practice really just being vulnerable, right, with my employees. Right? I want to share my story. I want them to see me for who I am, the leader I am, so that they can, especially the women in our workplace, see themselves as one day being the CEO at Second Harvest Food Bank, or frankly, any company. And so I practice vulnerability, right? I practice vulnerable leadership. People can come in to ask me questions. That's one of my rules, right? Leave the door open and let people know that when my door is open, they can come in to say, hi, how are you? Just because I have a big title doesn't mean that, oh, you can't come into the CEO's office. So those are the changes that I'm making now. And I actually believe, all of you ladies have spoken to this, we can play a very big role in inspiring women in our own workplaces to one day take our spots. And I think that's my mission, my personal mission.
That's perfect. And that goes right into our sort of final round. I'm going to go through each one of you and ask you this. And it is something from your own personal journey and from each of you where you maybe started to where you are today. If you could share just a piece of advice with the women in the room today that, you know, has stuck with you, either that you received or that you learned in your journey, or that you are wanting to share with each of them, because, you know, we're about helping each other, putting our hand back and lifting each other up. So I'll start with you, Patty.
Well, I'll take the technical women here. So I think, and I've spoken with a lot of different, at different women's groups and women in different stages of their career. And I think it's, in general, it's fair to say it's still a bit of an average, but in general, technical women, we're the ones that like to double check our homework. You know, we're the ones, if we miss something on a test, it just, you know, ate us up, and then we go study even harder. So, you know, I had a very fortunate experience early in my career. I had a boss who, you know, God knows why, but believed in me, shoved me off to like build a business. I'm like a newbie, barely out of grad school, go to Europe. I'd been in Europe once. for Oktoberfest. It's like, figure it out. Go move somewhere, build a business, then you can come back. And just the confidence, somebody has confidence in you and you have to go do it. The listening, okay, all of a sudden I land in London with a bunch of bankers. What do British bankers do? Okay, we're filming. They drink a lot. So that's not my gig, but I had to learn, how do you fit in? How do you find a way to work through this and not be the one in the office till 10 p.m. double checking something that only you care about? So, I think for, it's to women overall, but especially to our technical females, you have to open up, you have to look up and engage with others, and not just other females, but really find the connection points across your whole community, because finding a way to connect those dots, which I think is a unique skill set that females have, but you have to look up. You have to be willing to put yourself out there, have an opinion, even if everybody doesn't agree, that's fine. Nobody died. Your family still loves you if people don't agree with you. You have a reason why you think that. Go say it. Go convince people. Doesn't happen on a Tuesday, go back at it on Wednesday. Go back at it the following week. So the natural persistence you have to find, the natural voice you have to find, and focus on things that you care about, and your passion will come out. And that's a differentiator for everybody, but I think especially females.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Okay, Chloe.
I wish I knew in my 30s, 40s, and 50s what I now know at 68. I feel liberated, finally. And I would say, first and foremost, you can do it all. You can't do it all at the same time. And life is long. It is long, so you have the opportunity to do everything you want to do, but you might not be able to do it all at the same time. And when I was so much younger, I did believe I could be superwoman. I could be the super wife, the super mother, the super volunteer, the super high-level felony litigator, the super politician, because I had been mentored to be that superwoman. As a woman of color, I wore the superwoman cloak. And then when my health started falling apart, and the clumps of hair started coming out of my head, I said, you know what? I can't do it all. And it's okay. It's okay. Because I might not be able to be what I'm doing today, back when my children were babies, because it was a little bit too difficult for me to manage. But I will have time to fulfill my dreams and my objectives. You have time. And if you have to take time out, as I had to take time out when my mother had breast cancer, and I treasure every second, every minute I was with her during that time, and during the time that she was dying, that's okay too. That is your choice. Don't let anyone put that superwoman cloak on you. Be true to who you are and realize you can do it all, but you just can't do it all at the same time. True. And if you got to outsource some things, that's fine too.
That's perfect. That's perfect.
Very true. I think, and I do think it's different when you're younger versus as you get older. And I'm 45, so I'm now like comfortably middle-aged. Is that right? And when I was younger, it was just, I wanted to just be the most invaluable person on the field every single day, just absorbing everything. And I actually think that's important, right? You're learning. And I've worked in politics for a long time, and I remember one of my mentors said, you got to go be where the action is, right? I went to Iowa to go work for Howard Dean because the Iowa caucus is the place to be in a presidential campaign, because Iowa is Iowa, and it determines who the president's going to be, right? So I pick up and I'm moving to Iowa. Okay, here we go, right? Or whatever the next thing is. And I think what I've seen in politics often is people try to jump to the next thing very quickly. And I think it's actually important to be in a place where you're learning what that space is. I get asked all the time, are you running for Congress? You know, what's the next thing? You're running for statewide office? And I'm like, I don't know what the heck I'm doing next, but what I do know is I need to do this job really well in order to figure out whatever comes next. And I think that's important to sit in that place for a while and really understand that job or that role or that position or whatever it is, because you're just gaining knowledge and experience and confidence so that when you do elevate up, you're doing so in a way where you're much more ready for that position. So I think that's actually an important lesson. I think we get taught all these things about next thing, next thing, next thing, next thing, you know, and it's okay to say, you know what, I'm good here for a little bit, right? I want to learn these things. I am very happy in the California State Legislature. I don't need to go to Congress. There's a bunch of other people there that can deal with Congress, you know? And I think that's just an important lesson that often gets overlooked in our sort of like hyper-competitive world that we live in.
Yeah, so true.
Yes. Very similar to all my colleagues up here. And I would add that, and it goes to my earlier comments about knowing who you are. I think oftentimes we end up living for others and not for ourselves. I know that was my case, trying to outdo my eldest sister, because I'm just competitive like that, right? And it was all about that. And then really getting to the point to understand what is my calling, what is my purpose. And I do believe that everyone has a purpose and a calling in life. And that the challenge of life is about figuring it out. And some of us get the opportunity to figure it out sooner rather than later. But there needs to be some attention to that, right? Because if you're not minding it, then you're not going to find it. Right, so that's an advice that I give to all of my employees right now, and I'm happy to share that overwhelming percentage of our employees at Second Harvest range between the ages of 20 and 29. So I have Gen Z and millennials at Second Harvest, and I love it, right? Because they're yearning, they're wanting to know what is it like. Then the other thing that I will say about leadership is that, and I've learned to practice this, it didn't come naturally. It's through failures that I actually learned it. And I embrace mistakes. I embrace, you know, falling flat on my face every once in a while, because those are the real opportunities where you really learn, right? And oftentimes, I think I was raised to believe that anyone who makes a mistake is equal to a failure, right? Probably because I was a soccer girl, and if my team didn't win, you know, we would hear about it, right, from the coach and our parents. But it's the reverse, really, in life. It's through those hardships and those challenges that you learn the most. And so I would recommend that you embrace, you know, those moments where you didn't necessarily, you know, perform at 100%, and really reflect. Spend time reflecting, because there's a story and a message. And I think I carry that with me, hence the journal writing, right? Because that's where I get to really percolate and reflect on what is happening to me in my life, whether it be my career or as a mom or as a wife, right? So, yeah.
That's perfect, perfect. Okay, so I think we have some questions. Okay. All right, and I know we're watching our time. Okay, Palo Alto, this is for Margaret. Palo Alto Network's women leaders have to work more than our male counterparts and to retain their positions. Is that true? Is that true?
Well, let me say, so I've been in a lot of companies, always in the tech space. The cybersecurity space is an interesting one. There is always something bad happening in the world. And you can feel the pressure globally ratchet up. I'll use my own personal example. It takes a lot, because I've seen a lot. I know we always get through it. I was actually worried earlier this year. That says something. So I would say in different sectors and different industries, it is more of a consuming passion of how do we keep, in this particular one, how do we keep our customers safe? I mean, there is a real sort of medical with the hospitals, how do we have the emergency rooms not taken over by ransomware? There is a, we have to keep this machine going. So I would say overall in the cybersecurity industry, there is a 24/7-ish view of it. I wouldn't say I don't feel it anymore. Females, and I have a great mix of folks, and fortunate to have a very large organization here. I would say it's more of a industry thing where there's just such a sense of we have to protect the world. We're trying our best to keep people safe, literally safe, their money safe, their companies safe, and that ends up being more of a mission that you have to, draw your energy from that mission than it is not a 9 to 5.
Yeah, that makes sense, right?
There are a couple of people from my organization in here. It's like, echo that.
Okay, perfect. So to all of you, how about the darker side of telework? It's a 24/7 experience. You kind of alluded to that. What about you other ladies?
I couldn't do it. I found myself working 24/7, and it was actually impacting my mental health, right? I found myself after the first week, which of course, migrating to a whole virtual environment when you're not designed to do that was half the battle, but then really just working yourself 24/7 out of the need, and not having that geographic separation between a home and an office for me was just not a good, it was just not a good combination. Now that's not true for everyone, right? So to the point I think that was made earlier about having flexibility of how we do work in our companies is very, very important because it's not a one size fits all.
Makes sense.
I mean, I prefer I like to be in the office some days a week and then at home some days a week. But I do think, and I want to acknowledge I'm saying this from an incredible place of privilege, putting boundaries in for yourself is actually really important. And I have the ability to do that because I sort of run my own schedule. But, I do dinner, bath, and bedtime every night. I drive back and forth from Sacramento. I don't spend the night there like all my other colleagues because I have 2 little girls and they're frankly more important to me, and I make that a hard, fast rule. I work out. I make that a hard, fast rule. There's only one you, So even with the work from home, I still manage to do those things and create those boundaries, which are really important. But I also recognize that everyone has the ability to do that depending on where they're at in their job.
That makes sense.
The reason why I said you can do it all, but not all at the same time, there will be some jobs in which one cannot do telework. There will be some jobs in which there is not anything resembling balance. I have one of those jobs. Cybersecurity keeps me up at night. Cryptocurrency keeps me up at night. What's happening financially in this country keeps me up at night. I am on one plane after another. I have to meet with a multitude of groups and may only get, at times, 5 hours of sleep. There is no way I could have done this position when my children were small. And I would have to also admit, because you have to be, to your own self, be true. I'm an extrovert, so I love being out there, meeting with people and seeing people. I almost lost my mind during the pandemic. Well, we had to be sheltered in for a while. This is who I am, but at the same time, I would say it's not for everybody, and it really depends on the individual and where you are in your respective life.
It totally does. Well, we have hit the time marker. I love some of the nuggets that came out of today. There's only one you. Be true to yourself. Make sure that you're looking not only at yourself, but those around you and supporting each other. It is about empowering each other and about having that mobilizing our power together. And this group of phenomenal women have done a nice job today to sort of share their experiences and answer some of our questions. I want to thank you very much for your time, and we should all give them a round of applause.
All right.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mary Holing, Vice President for Environment. What a great program so far. Before we move on to our next panel, we're just going to take a minute to focus on wellness and self-reflection. So I'm pleased to introduce Yoshi Ramanujam, a certified Reiki practitioner at SJ Reiki, to take us through a few minutes of guided meditation.
Hi, my name is Yoshi Ramanujam, and I'm honored to be here to guide you through this mindful moment. So let's prepare our mind and body with a simple arm motion. We're going to raise our arms up slowly as we inhale. And on the exhale, go ahead and overlap your fingertips, and you're going to slowly push the air down in front of your center line. Excellent. We're going to do one more inhale. This time we're going to gather up kindness and compassion, overlapping the fingertips. We're going to spread kindness and compassion to our mind, our heart, and our body, kind of focusing on the gut. All right, and last time, inhaling as you raise your arms up, overlapping the fingers, and exhaling, calming the mind, calming the heart, and calming the gut. As you allow your body to settle down into its seated position, be aware of your seat, how it supports you, how the seat connects to your body. Adjust your sitting position if necessary, allowing your spine to feel nice and long, your bottom supported, and your feet flat on the ground. You can have your hands either palms down on your thighs or palms up on your thighs. All right. Imagine a bright white ball of energy above your head. And this ball is filled with compassionate, kind, and loving energy. We're going to have it flow down into your head and your face. It relaxes your forehead, relaxes your eyes, your cheeks, and your jaw. It calms your mind. And this compassionate energy comes down through your neck and your shoulders, both arms, both hands, and all your fingers. And again, allow the energy to come down your back, your upper back, your middle back, your lower back, your bottom, your hamstrings, and your calves. And allow the compassionate energy to come down your chest, your abdomen, your hips, your thighs, your shins, and finally down through the ankles and your feet. How does it feel to be bathed in compassion? Allow your entire body to be filled with kind and compassionate energy. Is there any feelings of uncomfortableness that you can lean into? Or simply accept the feeling of being hugged by compassion. Allow yourself to release any busy thoughts, release any judgments, and just for right now, let go of the past and let go of the future and simply be here right now. Let your gaze drift down towards your feet, or you may close your eyes, whatever is more comfortable. We're going to bring your attention to your feet. Sense the earth deep below your feet. Imagine you're in a beautiful, peaceful outdoor space. Imagine roots growing out of your feet and into the rich earth. You feel yourself becoming deeply grounded. Begin to breathe in this grounding energy, almost as if you could breathe in from the soles of your feet. So on your next inhale, you're going to fill your legs and your hips with this grounded energy. Place your hands on your hips and recite to yourself, I am healthy and vibrant. And let that message sink in. On your next inhale, fill up your lower abdomen, around your belly button and your lower back with grounded earth energy. Place your hands just below your belly button and recite to yourself, I accept the flow of life. And let that message sink in. And on your next inhale, fill up your upper abdomen. It's between your chest and your belly and the middle of your back. And place your hands there on your solar plexus area and recite to yourself, I am empowered to live my best life. And let that sink in. On your next inhale, filling up your chest, heart, lungs, and upper back. Placing your hands over your heart and reciting to yourself, I feel compassion for myself and others. And let that sink in. On your next inhale, filling up your throat and all around your neck and the tops of your shoulders. Place your hands gently around your neck and tell yourself, I speak my truth. I speak my truth. On your next inhale, through the bottoms of your feet, fill your head and your face area, placing the palms of your hands over your eyes, and recite to yourself, I am connected to my divine inner self. On your next inhale, you're going to bring your breath all the way from the bottoms of your feet, all the way through your torso and out the top of your head. And it's going to spray out the top of your head like a fountain. Placing your hands on top of your head. Divine light and love flow through me. Placing your arms gently back down on your thighs. Continue to breathe in and out through your nose and check in with yourself. How does your mind feel? How does your body feel? Are there any areas that can use more compassionate, grounded attention from your breath? And bring your breath into those areas. On your next inhale, start to gently wiggle your hands and your toes, move your head from side to side, and start to open your eyes as you come back to this room. As we bring our mindful moment to a close, let's acknowledge the light that is within each one of us. And let us also acknowledge and celebrate the light in others. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the wellness break as much as I did. My name is Elisa Coopersen. I'm the VP of Partner Success for SVLG. And I am pleased to introduce the second panel, Advancing Authentically, Owning, Overcoming Imposter Syndrome, and the women who will help us tackle this crucial topic. First, I'd like to invite Sophia Miller to the stage. Sophia is a software and digital platforms account team's director for Microsoft, but is blazing her own creative path. She's an entrepreneur with a vibrant women's wear line, an SF commissioner, and in what she considers her most important role to date, a new mom of twin warrior princesses, and they're in the room with us today. Sophia. Next, we're going to introduce Sherry Mager, who is U.S. Nationals Capital Market Readiness Partner at KPMG, where she advises VCs, startups, and some of the world's leading technology companies. She also serves as partner champion of KPMG's Women of Deal Advisory and Strategy of their network of women, where she supports, connects, champions women in M&A field. Sherry. Next, we're going to invite Hannah Gordon, who is the Chief Legal Administrative Officer for the San Francisco 49ers. Her achievement includes launching the first fan engagement community for LGBTQ+ fans and allies in professional sports to national acclaim. And in 2021, she designed the all-gender retail line that was first of its kind in the NFL, resulting in the 49ers 2021 Pride campaign being shortlisted as a best practice for the Best Leader Sports Award. Next, we're going to invite Malia Cohen, who is the chair of the California State Board of Equalization. She represents 23 counties and 9.5 million Californians, and she's previously served as president of the San Francisco Board of Supervisors. But most importantly, she's my emerged sister. Welcome. Moderating our panel is Kristen Brown, Director of Local and Regional Government Relations at SVLG, and lead of our Women's Leadership Series. Let's all welcome the panel to the stage.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here for this exciting conversation about advancing authentically, owning and overcoming imposter syndrome. We have a stellar panel here today, and I can't wait to hear what you all have to say on this topic, so let's go ahead and get started. Sherry, I'd like to start with you. According to a recent KPMG study, 75% of executive women say they have experienced imposter syndrome at one point or another in their careers. 81% of executive women believe they put more pressure on themselves not to fail than men do. And these are some really large numbers. Sherry, it's important for women at every level to know that if they are feeling these things, that they're common feelings, and that they're not alone. Are there things that companies and organizations can and should do to help foster a sense of belonging and lessen this experience of imposter syndrome?
Yeah, absolutely, and thanks for the question. I mean, certainly I think those numbers are so impactful when you think about how many women have experienced imposter syndrome in their careers, right? And I think the tone should be around communication and collaboration. So as we're thinking about what we can do in our organizations to sort of foster community and collaboration, I think communication is one of the most important things. So if we all know that 75% of us have felt this way before, then we're not alone, right? And we're not feeling so isolated. And I think just that, making that collaborative environment is going to be so important. And so as part of the study, there were two key things that were brought up around what we can do to create a more inclusive environment and help reduce these feelings of imposter syndrome. And so the first one is being a supportive performance manager or boss. So we all can think about people who have lifted us up and supported us and been so impactful in our journeys, regardless of whether we're just starting out or whether we've been in our careers for many years. And so I think we should also be thinking about how can we give back and how can we be that supportive leader. So pull from the people who've done it well for you, and maybe even think of some lessons of people that maybe didn't do it as well for you. I've certainly had both in my career. I've had leaders who, I didn't feel were terribly supportive, but I've had others who I didn't really expect them to be, reaching out and pulling me up, and they did so without me even asking or realizing that they cared. And so that's, I think, very important. So the more that we can do that and give back, I think it's really important. And then the second thing that people have said is important to reducing feelings of imposter syndrome is really feeling valued and feeling rewarded. And so we all can play a very important role in that. And I think, a message that I try to remind myself is don't wait for the big milestones to thank your team and to reward your team. Instill that message and that feedback along the way and celebrate the small steps along the way and reinforce how important they are to the overall process, to your team, to the journey, and how we can just be, so, I guess, recognizing everything that they do. So those would be, we could probably talk about this topic for the whole panel, but I know we have such amazing women up here that all have so many great things to say. But I would say keep in mind those two key things, which at least were what resonated in the women who were surveyed.
That's fantastic, thank you. And you're absolutely right. Just hearing from other women, you belong here, can really help lessen that feeling of imposter syndrome. Sophia, I'd like to go next to you. You're not only one of the youngest account team directors at Microsoft and a fashion designer, a San Francisco commissioner on the Office of Economic and Workforce Development, and a mother of twins. Not all, that's not enough. But you've also found time to start a scholarship with your brother Darren, a Googler, that honors young people that dare to dream big and pursue America's best post-secondary opportunities. Women tend to wear many hats, as it is. Trying to find time for our families, for our passions, and for our businesses, it can be really exhausting. Is there such a thing as work-life balance, or are we really looking at work-life integration? And then also, in your role at Microsoft, have you ever had doubts about your belonging there? And if so, how did you overcome or work through these kinds of feelings? And what advice do you have for other women who are having the same feeling. So I know that was a lot in one question, but let's start with, this thought on work-life balance or work-life integration.
Yeah, so definitely between work-life balance and work-life integration, I'm glad we are talking about integration. Balance is a misnomer. I am fortunate to be able to share my responsibilities with a strong village and community. So today, for example, I have my au pair, Chavez, in the background. I have my twin girls with me. And I said, you know what? I want them to get an opportunity to come outside, get some fresh air. And this is also great for her to learn from incredible women in the Valley. So one key thing that has helped me for work-life integration is being really clear about your non-negotiables. For me, that's family, that's fitness, that's my faith. And making sure that how can I figure out how to incorporate those things. Has anybody read the book Atomic Habits? Okay, so I highly recommend that book. It's been a game changer for my family. And one of the key things that we've implemented is a technique called habit stacking. So essentially, every morning I know I'm gonna wake up, I'm gonna feed the girls, I'm gonna change them, and I want to stack another healthy habit on top of that, and that is working out. So I know, even if it's 5 minutes, we're gonna take that trigger and make some time for our health and our fitness. And I know that for me to show up and be my best self, that is an important piece. So one tip I would say for work-life integration is figuring out what are some habits that you always have to do, and how can you add something small on top of it? And small, tiny steps can make a big impact. So that's what stands out for me for work-life integration. And again, just being clear and figuring out how to make it work for you. I think as I've progressed in my career, I've recognized that, as I said earlier, you can have it all, but not necessarily at the same time. And and recognizing that that's okay. There's gonna be ebbs and flows in your career, and sometimes personal is going to overcome professional, and sometimes professional overcome personal. But how do you have that open communication that you talked about with those people that are important in your life to make sure that you're being cognizant of what they bring to the table, thanking them along the way, and appreciating them so that you can show up and be your best self?
It's fantastic. And then also in your role at Microsoft, have you had this feeling of doubt, of imposter syndrome? How did you overcome that, and what advice would you give to others? Or if not, how did you do that? Because I would like to know that advice also.
Yeah. So happy to share that. So I was reading about Amy Cuddy, just refreshing myself on this whole imposter syndrome idea, and I like how she's started rephrasing it as imposter experience. Like it's not a syndrome as if it's a mental health sickness that we have. Sometimes you experience it, and it's not just for women. A lot of men experience the same thing. And one thing for me, yes, I definitely experienced a little bit of that at Microsoft. And the secret? Most people, the role that they're in, this is the first time they're doing it. The very first time. So think about the CEOs you work with, the VPs you work with. They are doing these roles for the first time, and that trigger helped me recognize, you know what? I may not have it all figured out along the way, but if I put in the effort and the energy and show up and try my best, then I feel good about what I'm putting forward. And I think what happens often is that we self-select ourselves out of opportunities. We self-select ourselves out of opportunities of growth that maybe we don't fit all of the requirements that are written down. But if you have the drive and the energy and the effort, then you can fill whatever those gaps are that are in your head. So one thing that I've seen recently is that it's not that necessarily people lack motivation. Sometimes you lack specificity. So if you're specific about what you need to reach whatever next goal, whatever those gaps are, and specific and recognizing that for yourself, and maybe, hey, I see that you're stellar at public speaking, and that's something that I want to improve in. And I want to spend 5 minutes with you to think through how do you prepare for your presentations. And being that specific will help you make those tiny steps on becoming, whatever that goal is for you in your career.
It's fantastic. Thank you so much. Chair Cohen, I'd like to go to you now.
Okay.
As we talk about women performing so many roles in their daily lives, let's take a look at your day. You are chair of the California State Board of Equalization that administers our $85 billion property tax system that funds schools and local governments. You are a member of the Franchise Tax Board. You recently served as president of the San Francisco Police Commission, and before that, you served as president of the City and County of San Francisco Board of Supervisors. And now you are running for California State Controller, the chief financial officer of the world's 5th largest economy. How do you bring energy to all of these tasks? And what lessons can we learn from you? I'm sure there's so many lessons we can learn to you. How do you bring so much energy to all of this? What do you have to share with us, to teach us?
Thank you. But hearing you list all that got me tired. So first I want to anchor the conversation, I just want to read the definition of imposter syndrome for everyone so that we're all on the same page. The persistent inability to believe that one's success is deserved or has been legitimately achieved as a result of one's own effort or skill. People suffering from imposter syndrome may be at increased risk of anxiety. So I just wanted to also just kind of talk a little bit around that. It's loosely defined as doubting your abilities and feeling like a fraud. Well, I don't ever feel that way. What I tell people is I come to this space of public service really with a desire to serve, right? When I was in the 3rd grade, we were on a tour of San Francisco City Hall. And when I got into high school, I did an informational interview with this man that was actually a member on the Board of Supervisors. And so I was like 15 or 16 years old, and I literally walked away from that interview thinking, if this guy can do it, I can do it. Because I really thought, there's nothing special about him. I mean, there was a lot of hype, and there was a lot of pomp and circumstance. They were like, oh, you're going to be meeting with so-and-so, supervisor, blah, blah, blah. And I walked away like, I could do this. I can do this. And I really think that that has really helped me propel to be in the space. Most of what you listed on that accomplishment list happened before Madison was born. So Madison's only 2 years old, so this is running for office with a 2-year-old is something different. That's another panel, though. But in terms of imposter syndrome, the way I truly try to coach women to go around it or to get through it is just to remember that if they can do it, you can do it, that there's nothing special about this person. Much like what Sophia was saying, that this is a person that's in a role that is new to them as well. And they put their pants on just like you one day, one foot at a time. Now, I will admit, oftentimes I will overcompensate by really doing my homework, making sure that I'm the most knowledgeable. I read all of my information packets. I think about questions that they will ask me, questions that would make me feel nervous. I do a lot of role playing when I'm getting ready to give a speech and present in a public forum. So there maybe is some over preparation, but that was more earlier in my 20s. Now in my 40s, I am like owning it and happy to be and sharing the stage with women and celebrating them. So panels like this is really important to all of our growth. We as leaders, you as leaders on your individual teams, but also as women as we all continue to grow and mature, because ultimately my goal is to chip down the patriarchy. Those systems that are in place to keep women down, keep us in our place, all of that. We are all in professions that are traditionally male-dominated. I'm in a profession where there's taxes, finances, and fees. Donald Trump's first piece of legislation was a tax break for his wealthy friends. Now, I don't want to step on toes and go partisan on everyone, but the reality is that there are very few African Americans that are in the space of finance, let alone women that are in the space of finance, let alone Latinas. Like, there is just an opportunity here for us to grow and to collectively bring people along and bring us all to the table. And to our allies, the men that love us, you also have a responsibility to bring us along and bring us to the table and bring us into spaces and to be a champion and an ally and know when to fall back. I think that's also a really critical piece. Know when to fall back and to elevate your sister forward. And I believe that that begins to change the culture, change that feeling of imposter syndrome, change the fact that we're special or that we're one of a handful. And most importantly is to normalize female leadership.
Absolutely. Yes.
Oh my God.
And Chair Cohen, you mentioned your 2-year-old, Madison.
Oh, yes.
So as a mother, What message do you have for other mothers in the workplace who are rising professionals?
You know, I think that we were been dealt a blessing with this hybrid workplace, this work environment. I, too, much like you heard from Buffy Wicks, Assemblywoman Wicks earlier, and how she has had her child and she puts her family first. I do the same thing. Much like Sophia, I bring Madison with me into spaces that I can teach her and learn and show her so that she can see not only, she hears me on the Zoom all the time, but see other women and other men that are in leadership roles, and so that she begins to fashion like what it is that she wants to do. Now she's 2, so I mean we're really working on potty train, to be fair, but I do have high hopes for her, and we'll continue to cultivate that that ambition, not stifle it, not encourage her to play small, to be creative, and so these are things that are in the back of my mind that I'm thinking about when I'm looking at my calendar and my schedule. Today's a crazy one, so just getting up, getting her ready, getting her set up for the rest of the day, and I think also relying on the community. You're my mother, my aunt, nanny help. It is okay, and bringing them into the space and widening. I mean, my mother knew I was elected, but never really knew like the full scope of like what it is that we're doing. So then when she started to come into the house and try to help me manage with Madison, I'm giving speeches on Zoom, like it taught her. And so that is, I guess, my mantra is always to be teaching as I'm doing, and I'll rest there.
Thank you so much. Hannah, let's go to you.
Okay. Also, I want a lawn sign. I'm voting. We all have our ballots because Chairwoman Cohen deserves our vote.
Thank you, Hannah.
And our donation.
Hannah, in an interview that you did last fall for NFL.com, Kevin Warren, then with the Vikings, had asked you what you wanted to do. And you commented that you sometimes undershot your desires because you didn't want to be perceived as too ambitious. And I think a lot of women can relate to this. I know I can. And we often feel that we don't think our true vision or wants will be taken seriously, so we kind of downplay them a little bit. And when you gave your answer, when you told him that answer, he told you to aim higher. So what kind of effect did this have on you, being encouraged to think bigger and to vocalize it? What advice would you give to the women in this audience about being authentic to yourself and speaking your truths?
Sure. So I think when what I had told him at the time, I was not yet in the position that I'm in today as a chief legal officer. And I said that's what I had wanted to be, instead of actually saying I wanted to be the president of a team, which is what I really had wanted to be. And he was like, but no. Like, you're already going to be the chief legal officer at some point. Like, you need to aim higher. Like, you can do more. And for me, it was so encouraging to know that someone else believed in me, someone who was in that seat already. And it gave me more confidence to say it, because when you're affirmed by others, you feel more comfortable. And I think what I also had to get comfortable with was that not everyone was going to be like Kevin. There were going to be people that when I said I want to be a president said, ooh, who does she think she is? And I had to be okay with that. And so I think a lot of what we have to do when we talk about imposter syndrome and being authentic to ourselves is to accept that we will not always be liked. Because as women, we are often socialized to be people pleasers. And in terms of being authentic and speaking our truths, I really think we have to know ourselves first. So I wrote a 8-week guided journal, mostly because I had so many people in situations like this who were like, well, how do I get where you are? How do I do this? And I wanted to give people something practical. You're gonna be like, is she talking about her book? Yes, girl, I am. So I'm like, is she self-promoting? Yes, because guess who's not gonna promote you unless you are promoting what you are trying to tell people? And it really came from a genuine place of, I want you to have the lessons that I learned. And the first lesson was film study. Like, as somebody in football and sports, what you see is that every scout, every coach, every athlete, they are watching what they did and getting to know themselves, their own habits, their own weaknesses, their own strengths. And so we talk so much about being authentic, and I don't think we spend enough time on like, who am I? Because I can't be authentic if I don't know myself. So it really starts with yourself, leading yourself, knowing yourself, and from there you can have the vision, and then you can speak it out loud. Then you can speak your truths to other people. So that's my experience with it.
Absolutely, wonderful. And you know, another question, and I'll start with you. So sports, but then also tech and politics and business. There's progress, but these are all still very male-dominated fields, as all of you have touched on, right? So I'd like to just hear from each of you briefly, what would your number one piece of advice be for women that are entering the field that you are in now?
Yes. May I?
Yes, please.
And this is going to stem off of what Hannah was saying. I heard this very early on in my career. Ambition is not a dirty word. And never play small. You don't have to compensate to make his ego comfortable. A lot of women are nodding because you know what I'm talking about. And the men are like, yeah, they can conceptualize it, they understand it, they can intellectualize it, but I mean, I want you to own it and to embrace it. Ambition is not a dirty word, and it's okay to be ambitious. It's okay to be the president. It's okay to run for president of the United States. It's okay to be the governor of the state of California.
Yes.
We got it. We got it. I love it. I love it.
I guess if we're going on the line, my advice for sports or any male-dominated field, competence and confidence. So you have to know your stuff first, like learn your craft, really be expert at your craft, and then be confident that you are competent at it. Because if you are missing any one of those two things, like if you come in confident but you really don't know what you're doing, like people will figure that out eventually. But if you know what you're doing and you come in like you don't, people are gonna assume you don't. Like you really do need to come in there and own it. Like you need to come in and whatever you have, if you have to get in the power pose, like Amy Cuddy teaches you, like do what you have to do to come in there like you know what you're doing, because you do.
Absolutely. I think what I would say is it's important to get out of your comfort zone. So if you're feeling comfortable, it's time to change that. And I feel like it's a muscle that you develop. And I made sort of the first big change when I was 15 years old, and I chose to go and do a rotation with another family in another province. I'm from Canada originally, and lived, in a different province with a different language and a new family. That was like out of my comfort zone. But the more I've done those types of things along the way, the easier they become. So challenge yourselves. I like the saying, get comfortable being uncomfortable. And I think the more you challenge yourself, the more you step into those places that don't feel so comfortable, that's where you grow, that's where you develop, and the sky's the limit. So just get uncomfortable, ladies.
And then from a tech perspective or any male-dominated field, I would say two things. One, I encourage people to do more of what sets your soul on fire. And what does that mean? Everybody has a superpower and gift. And if you're not tapping into that and letting people know, hey, when Malia comes, she's gonna drop the mic on stage. And she's gonna put herself in opportunities to do that, right? So think about that. What is that superpower for you? And are you able to demonstrate that in your interview? Are you able to demonstrate that in how you say, hey, in the first 90 days, I'm gonna accomplish X, because I already know that's something that's in my wheelhouse. And then the second thing is, especially I would say for tech interviews, and sometimes it feels like they're trying to psych you out or like catch you with, the wrong, this question's gonna you're not gonna be able to answer it. It's more about the how. It's about your behavior. It's about how you think that people are truly interested in understanding. So I would say in kind of the butterflies you might feel in your stomach, that's not a bad thing. That shows that you actually care, you're excited, you're energized about the opportunity. So to sit with that, it will go away, and recognize that it's more about how you think that people are really interested in as you're trying to enter new career opportunities.
This is great advice from all of you. I know I'm learning a lot. I just want to take a moment to remind everyone, if you have questions for our panel, there's a number here that you can text your questions to. I'll take a quick pause to see if we have any questions that have come in already. And they are headed to the stage. Thank you. All right. So the first question is about imposter syndrome. And the question is, how do women undercut themselves publicly, and how can we remedy this? So this goes back, I think earlier we were talking about kind of watering down our ambitions or undercutting how well we do things or how good we are at things. And so how have you seen that in yourselves and other women? How do you think we can remedy this? I'll open the floor. Please do.
Sometimes women are a little shy, right? They're like this, or they'll talk with their hand over their mouth. They think that what they have to say is not important. And how do you remedy this? Say it. You got something to say it. Most people in the room will have that same question. And be confident. Sometimes you can always do your homework before and come with a pre-thought of question that you know, sometimes, well, in my industry, you get the notes, you get the agenda, you'll have slides, things sent to you before. So in preparation, I'm always thinking, what are the questions? And I, you know, I'm in finance, so I'm like, how much is this going to cost? What's the rate of return of the investment? Is this going to raise taxes? You know, so that's what I'm always in the mindset that I'm always thinking of.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think one of the things I've seen during the pandemic, certainly in the working world and being on video and on screen, is one of the things I've seen women do is be off camera and be more silent. And some of it had to do with, oh, you know, I'm not quite sort of ready to be on camera yet. And so I was like, that shouldn't matter. So, you know, I'd be on camera with my teams. I didn't have makeup on. Maybe my hair was in a ponytail. Maybe I had just finished my workout, like just to show them that it's okay and you're not going to be judged. But I think, you know, we stand in sort of the background if we're not visible and if we're not present. And so I think in this world where it's very odd to be on camera all day long, and I'm glad we're getting to more of a hybrid environment again, but I encourage my, you know, colleagues and my employees, like, be on camera. You don't always have to be on camera, but we want to see you, we want to hear you, we want to, you know, get your contribution. So be that person who's present and in the moment.
Yeah, and a lot of apologizing.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry that my kids are in the background. I'm sorry I'm not ready. I'm sorry. I'm sorry all the time. And I kind of tested myself at one point to try to say excuse me or pardon me or like find something else so that like I wasn't constantly saying sorry, because it becomes a verbal crutch and we start doing it without even noticing that it's in our language. And I think there's so many things, like both of you are saying, like sitting like this, or like having your hair in your face, or raising your voice at the end of every sentence as if it was a question, or sort of seeking that, like, oh, I don't know, what do you think? Like, oh, I don't know if this is a good idea, but so having more confidence in what we're saying.
Yeah, and I love that. What stood out, Hannah, for your point is, even in my LinkedIn now, like my first thing for Sophia, it's twin mom. And I wear that as a badge of honor. So there's no need to say, you hear the kids in the background. Yeah, you hear them, because I just had them, and I'm here, I'm showing up, and I'm still delivering and running circles around most of you. So wear it as a badge of honor, own it. It is an additional attribute to be a mother, to be an aunt, to be a cousin, to be a best friend. And I think more women, we have to show up and say, like, this is a value add. This is not a detractor. And then the other thing I would say is mansplaining is real. And what happens as you're talking, one trick I learned from one of my leaders is, hey, be the first person to speak. That way, that question, that you're like, I had the same question. Okay, well, if you asked it at the beginning, then you get the credit for it. So how to avoid some mansplaining from happening? Be the first person to speak up, and definitely take recognition, because sometimes it happens and your thought, your ambitious and beautiful idea, someone thinks Harry said it. And you're like, what? No. Oh, Harry, I'm glad you emphasized my point. Back to what I was saying. Yes, that's a great way to implement this idea, and take back ownership and do not feel any qualms about it.
Speaking of taking back ownership and being unapologetic, also, it's okay to show emotion. It's okay to emote. It's okay. I listen to a lot of public comment and hear testimony on very serious issues that have had an effect on people's lives. And people will come all the time in the public space and say, I'm so sorry. Mostly sorry. No man has ever said I'm sorry. But a woman say, I'm so sorry, I'm crying. And I say, stop saying sorry. It's okay to feel what you're feeling, because that is part of your testimony. That is part of who you are. That is why we're having this venue for you to come in and to share.
That's so important. Everything that you've all just said is so important, and feeling the emotions, I have had that experience in my life. I know other women have as well, of not wanting to appear too emotional in meetings or in experiences with our colleagues, or even just in our life with our friends and our family. The thoughts about not apologizing is another thing. I remember at one point in my career feeling that I was being interrupted a lot, and I was speaking with a colleague about it, and I was telling her, I think I just need to say, I'm sorry, I was still speaking. And she goes, no, don't start with I'm sorry, just say I was still speaking. And
yeah,
that's
Kamala
something,
taught us that lesson, right?
That's right.
There's a sweatshirt now.
That's right. So that's something I'm still working on. But I think it's so important, everything that you've all just shared. Our next question is for you, Sophia, and it was about your habit tracking. And someone wants to know if you keep a bullet journal.
That's a great question. So yeah, as a techie too, I definitely like to use a lot of tools. So I definitely use notes a lot and put down one thing that my husband and I do, say like, what are your top 3 things you want to accomplish? And like now I have verbalized it. We have accountability. I could put it in my notes and I can go back to it. So habit tracking verbally and also writing it down is nice. You can also go back to it. And then another thing we do is we set goals for the year, and we use the reminders tool on Apple. And we break it down by topics. We put our little tracker things in there, and we don't always do it, but we try to go back monthly and like check on the progress. See how we're going against things. Where do we need to repivot and reapproach something differently? So for me, it's been really helpful. That Atomic Habits book is a game changer. Definitely a game changer.
I'm gonna have to write that down. I'm gonna read that book now.
Yeah.
You asked at the beginning if anyone had read it, and I thought, well, I know someone who's going to now, and that is me. So here's another one that I think is a really important question that we haven't really touched on. There are different kind of leadership styles and different ways of being authentic and expressing your authenticity. And this question from the audience is, what if your authentic leadership style isn't to be in the spotlight? How do you assert your competence and your confidence when attention isn't really what suits you?
You're asking for alpha females.
Yeah.
Well, you know what?
No, but I mean, I've seen other people do it, so I'm gonna say what other people do. I do think that competence is, and I don't know exactly what the job is of the person, et cetera, it would be helpful if we could be like super fact specific. I'm such a lawyer. I'm like, but what are all the facts? But I do think that leadership isn't just about being in the spotlight, right? It's about who am I leading and what am I leading them towards? Like, you can be an effective leader and people will see that if you have made clear, this is the goal that I'm trying to achieve, this is who my team is, I have motivated my team to get to that goal, and I've delivered. It doesn't mean you have to like always pound the table, but you do need to, depending on who the audience is that you are trying to demonstrate this leadership to, like, your team knows if you're a leader or not, and that has nothing to do with like how you publicly speak. That's how you speak to them. That's how you speak in meetings. Like, do you have the respect of your people? That you may be spending tons of one-on-one time with them. And then if it's that you want to see if your like boss is seeing your leadership, like, I would have that conversation with him or her. Like, what is it that you need to see from me? Like, what are the goals that we're trying to achieve as a company, as an organization, a department, whatever it is, and then demonstrating how you're delivering. So yeah, I don't think that leadership, again, like, we may all be alphas, but like, there are plenty of people with different personalities who are in leadership roles.
Yeah, I'll just say on Hannah's point, if you want to become a people manager, one of the most important things is highlighting the people that work for you.
Amen.
So we're alpha females, but it doesn't mean that you actually have to be the one on stage. Like, true awesome leaders, if I think about them, they have their rock stars owning the material, and they're cheering them on. They're putting them in the right rooms. They're activating the people that work for them to do well and to show up well. So I would just say, like, again, what we talked about earlier, understanding what truly sets you apart. Like, are you being able to show that to your leadership, being specific with the feedbacks? Oftentimes we're scared to ask these questions because we don't want the bad answer. But what's worse is not knowing. So it's better to ask. and be direct about, hey, am I meeting these metrics, these KPIs, and I'll just go the tech focus. If you're at Amazon, for instance, like they love a one-pager. That's a written document, right? You don't have to speak towards that. So every industry, every job has a different culture and how they assess people, how they look for leadership, and how they promote. So recognize what those are and play in a place that you're gonna do well, knowing your own strengths and weaknesses.
Right. Yeah, that's great. You know, and this also kind of makes me think about something that I'm interested to get your feedback on as well, all of you, is that kind of concept of fake it until you make it. Mm-hmm. And I'll say that because I admit I am actually an introverted person, but I found that the things that I was drawn to and the passions that I had in community and government and politics required me to kind of be a little bit more extroverted, and so I kind of had to fake it until I made it, right? But to the point that you had said earlier, Sophia, I believe it was you that said just get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Yep. And so bringing this kind of, tying this all together, right? The authenticity, the imposter syndrome or imposter experience, getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, it seems like there's a lot of vulnerability that is kind of required in being a leader and having leadership as a woman in power, I suppose you would say. And so we just have a couple minutes left, but thinking about our experiences and our discussions that we've had today about imposter syndrome specifically, there's another question from the audience about, do you feel that men experience imposter syndrome to the same level as women and just don't speak about it or don't discuss it? Or do you think that it's an entirely different experience? Well, that's a
good one. We're all thinking about
that. Yeah, no, these moments of pause aren't bad. They're just, we're thinking.
I guess I would say I think men do experience imposter syndrome. I don't think they experience it to the same extent that maybe women do, or they experience it differently. But I think it's something we all live with. And we had something interesting happen. We do a sort of leadership training courses for all of our employees, and we had a session where we invited everyone to come to a session we did on imposter syndrome. And the event was oversold, and there were just as many men as women who signed up for it. So to me, that was very telling. It actually was an event that was targeted to our women in deal advisory and strategy, but we had just as many men show up as well. So I think that to me said that we're all dealing with this in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah. I would agree, but I think that it might manifest in a different way to what you were saying. That I think, and it's not all men are equal, right? I think if you're a man of color, maybe your first generation to going to college, maybe your parents were immigrants in your first generation here in the U.S., that there may be some uncertainty there. And I think, see, if you grew up at a country club and your father is a judge, then you may have a privilege that allows you to insulate yourself and not feel or not acknowledge that imposter syndrome, and then overcompensate with being brash, being bold, sometimes it can be considered as arrogant, overconfident.
Yeah. I mean, there's certainly plenty of people who are insecure, and I don't know if that's the same thing necessarily as imposter experience, but that will often manifest in really bad leadership. It will manifest in wanting to have a fear-based culture, wanting to make sure that your number twos can never supplant you. So I definitely have seen insecurity in people who are in those roles, who are men, and so I think, yeah, it can happen, but probably, like Malia said, it manifests in different ways for different people.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would just say it's across the valley, not gender specific. How we've traversed through risk-averse companies, heavy risk-centric, and that alone is going to have some kind of imposter feeling in how you show up and how you thrive in the valley. So for me, I don't think it's gender specific. Maybe how you address it and approach it, that might depend differently on your gender. But again, I think a lot of us feel it, and it's not anything to do with you being, with your gender.
Yeah. Well, ladies, we are at the end of our time. I am so honored to have learned so much from all of you today. I know that all of us in this room likely feel the same. Thank you so much for everything that you've shared with us. It's been a wonderful conversation. If we could give a round of applause.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right.
Hello, everyone. My name is Vilek Tang. I am the Vice President of Government Relations. We will now be taking a brief 15-minute break to stretch our legs. There are refreshments right outside this door. Please grab some treats and make some new friends during this time. And please also return to your seat at exactly 2:45 p.m. We look forward to seeing you back at our next panel. Thank you. All right, everyone, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that much needed caffeine and sugar break. Looks like everyone's filing all in. Before we begin our next panel, please enjoy this short video highlighting our Women's Leadership Series Roundtable.
Hi, I'm Kristen Brown, Director of Local and Regional Government Relations and lead of the Women's Leadership Roundtable Series here at the Silicon Valley Leadership Group.
And I'm Becca Killian, Event Marketing Manager and co-lead of the Women's Leadership Roundtable Series. For the past 15 years, this series has brought together a diverse mix of successful women leaders. These exceptional individuals provide an understanding of the steps they have taken to climb the corporate ladder to a successful leadership position.
The intent of this series is to educate, provide practical strategies to adapt plans, and a means to encourage women to establish their own goals and objectives in achieving advancement within their own organization or agency. We've had the pleasure of hosting the Speaker of the United States House of Representatives, Nancy Pelosi, United States Senator Dianne Feinstein, former White House Press Secretary Dee Dee Myers, founder of Girls Who Code, Reshma Saujani, and many more.
Between breaking barriers and leveling the playing field within male-dominated industries, we are able to let our hair down and speak openly and honestly about gender equity issues.
We want to amplify your voice and experience during these important conversations, so keep a lookout for invitations to participate in the final few 2022 Women's Leadership Series Roundtables.
Hello, everyone. My name is Madison Vanderclay. I'm the Senior Associate for Public Policy here at SVLG, and it's my honor today to present our final panel of the day, Funding Founding Female. We have put together a fantastic panel of women to dive into the issues and solutions for women looking to found successful companies. Amy Allison is founder and president of She the People, an organization that brings together women of color to transform the national political debate. In 2019, she organized and moderated the first presidential forum dedicated to issues specific to women of color. Welcome, Amy. Jessica Chen is co-founder of Defy Pay Network, which is democratizing access to cryptocurrency. Through fighting the high transaction fees charged to buyers, they aim to bring financial inclusivity to over 1.6 billion people. Welcome, Jessica. Julian Guthrie is a journalist, author, and the founder and CEO of Alfie, a new company that connects women of all backgrounds with the goal of advancing together. Welcome. And moderating our panel today is Laura Wilkinson, SVP and Head of Communications for SVLG. Over her career, she's managed communications for politicians, leading policy think tanks, and Fortune 500 companies. Please join me in welcoming our panel.
Thank you all so much for being here this afternoon. And just a note for being our authentic self, I'm recovering from a broken wrist, so hence the splint. I'm really excited to be here for this final conversation where we're going to really dig into helping to demystify the big questions around how do you raise funds? You've got a great idea and you're a female who wants to start a company. How do you navigate these spaces? How do you really help make sure that you're connecting with the right investors, that you're asking the right questions, and that you're bringing your best self to the room? And so the women who are sitting here before me have really helped to kind of blaze those trails. They're also, in doing so, making sure that they're opening the doors for others. So I think we're really going to gain some important insights from this conversation. So I'm really excited. So I think to just kind of dive in, I know some of the conversations we've had today have been kind of talking about how the pandemic has really helped to lay bare some of the disproportionate burdens that women have faced in the workplace and in life in terms of navigating family care, whether that's children or sick ones or elderly parents. But there are some bright signs. I think with the great C-session and sort of this new flexible work environment, we are seeing now more women-led companies started. We're seeing, according to PitchBook, we're seeing more funding for women-led and co-founded companies. We're also seeing women-led incubators. And it's starting to be exciting to see women signing checks for other women. So I'd love to kind of do a little bit of a lightning round to kind of help us see, from your experience, either raising money or kind of being in the industry, how are you seeing signs of progress? Are you seeing it get any easier, or kind of help us demystify what it's like to raise funds?
I heard a joke last night, and I'll share that first, from a founder. I said, how are you doing? How are you sleeping? He said, well, I'm a first-time founder, so I'm sleeping like a baby. I wake up and cry every 2 hours. Which I was like, I completely relate to this. No, it's, I see many more women becoming founders, starting their first companies, which is fantastic. More women as funders on the VC side, but the numbers are still really pretty abysmal. I wrote a book called Alpha Girls about a group of women in venture capital who were succeeding and helped finance and build some of the foremost companies of our day, and you'd never heard their stories. And at the time, this was around 2016 when I started reporting this, 94% of all check-writing VCs were men, 2% of all VC dollars went to women-founded companies. And out of great frustration come great companies. So I was really motivated from that. I want to be one of these risk takers. I want to come up with a solution for a problem that I saw. So the numbers are still similar to that. Women are starting to make more inroads. So there is progress. It's not where it needs to be. And we need to, I hope that everyone here walks away with some idea about how to advance something you're passionate about, a company, support a woman founder, and the role of the funders cannot be underestimated too. So progress, but a long way to go.
Great, Jessica?
Well, good afternoon. So I think I actually have a lot of experience to share with this. I am on my second startup, and before my first startup, I was a finance executive at banks and insurance companies. So I have quite a journey to come from somebody who does financial modeling all the time to somebody who's pitching and selling all the time. My journey, I was very fortunate in my fundraising with the VCs. I have sponsors and mentors, and they are actually both male. These are two very well achieved, very successful two managing partners, investors, and board members in the Valley. And I happen to be working with them in my previous positions for a long time, and they like the way how I operate. So my fundraising journey started with preparing decks and executive summaries and a paragraph of describing what we're doing, and they will send personal emails to their contacts. And sometimes I would go to meetings. They would tell me, my mentors would say, you should talk to this person. Even though they're not gonna write you a check, they will point you to where somebody would. one lesson I learned from pitching to VCs is that you have to identify the VCs that already agree with your pain point. It is impossible to convince somebody that this is a pain point they don't see it. VCs only invest in the pain points they agree on. The second thing I would say, Bay Area is it's a place that's truly unique in that people are very willing to do a coffee with you, meet up with you just to open up their network. So do not hesitate to ask people to do an intro for you. And people are much colder with cold calls and cold emails. But if it's a warm intro, it goes a very, very long way.
So use those networks.
Yes.
Great. And Amy, over to you.
Hi, everyone. I recently read a book called The EOS Life, which is Entrepreneur Operating System, that gives a framework to think about those of us who dive in as entrepreneurs, take risks, and do something different as an expression of ourselves. And in this book, it says, look, if you are a person who's an entrepreneur or founder, here's your goal. Here's like the end goal. To work 100% on what you love to do, 100% of the time. 100% of the people you work with, you love. I know a lot of us are really far from that right now. Being adequately compensated or appropriately compensated, and your work makes a difference to the world. So I'm going to talk about the fourth thing. All of them are important. For me, who comes from the world of advocacy, politics, public service, I had been working both in the private sector, the public sector, for a long time, and had this idea that became pressing for me over a course of 7 or 8 years, that there were a group of us in this country who weren't listened to. We suffered the most of the policies and practices of this country. We were the lowest on every measured, from economic to other kinds of measures in this country. We contributed the most in terms of the civic and social life. We volunteered, we got people out to vote, we were civically minded, and yet we were the least represented in terms of elected leadership. And when we put that together, that's 20% of the population, the least represented group of people who had the most to offer this country. Now, this idea lived on my shoulder, like just out of sight for a really long time, and I ignored it. I was advising how to spend $10 million in political spending in Arizona to activate particularly Latino, but also Black and Latino voters. And I recognized that I had the experience, but there was no other organization that was focused on Black, Asian American, Pacific Islander, Indigenous, and Latinas, women of color. No one, no one. So not only did I have to find people who were willing to fund an effort to elevate the political power of this group, who was never in the paper, no one talked about, no one really valued, I had to convince people of a possible future to get them to write checks. So now I have 2 organizations, a nonprofit and then a C4, which does political work. And it is first and foremost leaning into people that already thought, especially with Trump in office, what is it that we missed? Why? What is the situation? Why is there somebody who is advancing policies that aren't serving women? What is going on in this country? And I could come in with a possible future for us all. And it was in leaning into those relationships that I could go from a person who would advise on a $10 million, ad and political program spend to my own effort. And I remember I was like, I can't raise money. I don't really know how to raise money. But when the first person wrote the check for $50,000, which at that time was like incredible for me, something, the dam broke in terms of my own heart and capacity. We believe in this country. We believe in women of color. There are people there, so now I got to find my people. And so that's the long way of me saying that it's not a private company, it's an expression of this work in these organizations, but it still requires leaning into, like, carrying a vision and holding that vision and leaning into the relationships and just going for it. I heard several times today, the secret to being a founder is there's no word no, it's just not yet. And you have to keep, there's something in you that has to be that persistent person that is dedicated to finding your people.
No, that's so powerful. Thank you. It's about how do you identify whether it's the idea or the business plan and the networks, and it's really about sort of having that power and principle and then connecting it to the right people who are going to help you drive that mission forward. So I think we'd like to now just kind of tailor questions for each of you. So Julian, you as a leader have really had a unique set of experiences. You've been a journalist and an author, and now you've kind of taken the leap and founded your own company that is focused on advancing women. I think one of the things that we see is that, particularly since there are a lot of on-roads and off-ramps and on-ramps for women in their careers, that we develop skills that may be transferable, but sometimes we're kind of fixated on this idea of, here's my career path, this is kind of the way to get from point A to point B, but maybe we should be looking at them in terms of pivots and how to kind of take those skills and do something else with them. How have you kind of applied that mentality, and how do you think that maybe women and men vary in how they sort of think about their career at a macro level?
Well, it's a great question, and I do look at my journey as more of a continuum, even though it seems, okay, you were a journalist forever, then you're an author, and now you're the founder and CEO of Alfie, and how did that happen? Was this a crazy detour? And again, I do look at it very much as a continuum. So I look at what is the underlying skill that I have, and I developed it, because I worked hard at it every single day for literally 20 years, and that is storytelling. And this is something that you both touched on, is when you're going out for funding, when you're talking about starting a company, what story are you trying to tell? Now we're going out for our first customers. How do we help companies tell their story? How do we help companies represent themselves as a place where women want to work and love to work? We have an AI communication tool. So how do I use my storytelling skills, my obsession with words, to help build this tool? I didn't have a background in AI, but I have a background in communication. I have a background in writing. I have a background in storytelling. So look at something that you have that is your superpower, that is something you're passionate about, and how can it carry you forward to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. Answering the second part of your question was, what's the difference between genders, potentially? Anecdotally, I would say, and I think everyone here would probably nod in agreement, is that women want to check every single box. And we should know that perfection is not our friend, and risk-taking is so important for women. What I'm doing, yes, it's risky in that I hadn't done this before, but no risk, no reward. So it's not checking every single box. It is believing that you're going to figure it out, as in, if you don't know yet, but you will go and figure it out. So again, think about what is that underlying skill that you have, this passion that you have, and how can it carry you forward and open one door after the other.
Great, thank you. Yeah, that self-belief, I think, is so important, but also knowing and tapping into those skills is really, I think, something that we've heard throughout the day today is about the competency and the confidence, and how do you kind of take those with you.
And working harder, right. It's assiduous in application. It's a Japanese principle of Kaizen, where you get a little bit better each day, and all of those incremental gains add up to something significant.
Excellent. So Amy, She the People, your organization is, as you said, really focused on how do you really connect and ensure that women of color have not only a seat at the table, but that their issues are prioritized. We know that's something that's equally of important in the corporate world, but also, let's be real, it's an election year, it's a midterm year, but it's an election year, and perhaps at no other time have we seen issues of that directly impact women and women's equality more so. How are you thinking about kind of connecting women and lifting them up, and how do we sort of take some of the lessons from the political world and apply them to the business world?
I feel really strongly that in order for women, particularly women of color, to step fully into our leadership and power, not only personally, but more broadly in politics and business, we need to change our culture. When I started this work, women of color were invisible, but women of color are the majority of women in this state. They're a majority of women in the San Mateo County, the majority of women in New Mexico, Arizona, Texas, Florida, Georgia, all the places that we consider across the country who will determine the future of the country. We're the majority of women. We're not minorities. And the way that we shift our thinking opens up new possibilities for us. You know, we're moving into a place in this country where no one's going to be the majority. In terms of numbers, there's more Latinas in California and the country than other women of color, but honestly, for Americans to move forward, we need to operate and think in a multiracial way, working for a multiracial democracy. That's how it will be stabilized and healthy, for people's votes to be counted and things like that. That's a shift in mentality in a time where so much of what we heard over the last years was seeking to separate and break us down. So when we talk about when we talk about building connections across race, across intersectionality, no matter what you do for a living or what your walk of life, we have some common values that we need to assert and talk about, particularly this year. I mean, here, the reality is that, our freedom to pursue our dreams, our freedom to control our body, a freedom to be safe, those things are at stake. And I think those are the common themes that we can talk about as women, and we can organize on politics. I mean, the things that are wrong with this country are way bigger than politics. It's way bigger than politics. It's not like one election or one political party will solve the thing.
Right.
So when I say all that, I say, how can we adopt a language and a way of being that gives us space to come together in new ways as Americans, and give space for women of color who have been both ignored, silenced, and have suffered in this country, to take lived experience and not make them off to the side or unelectable, but it's the very experience of being excluded and feeling like they don't belong and suffering and going into heavy debt and not having their voice taken seriously. All that experience qualifies them for leadership, and actually the country needs us. And when we start shifting in that way, it opens up the possibility. The organization I found, She the People, helps to solidify both that way of being and the possibility. So there would be no way, for example, Kamala Harris would be in the White House without the organizing of She the People and others to say, we have to have a woman of color in the White House, because women of color are the majority of Democrats, and every state that matters, that's going to determine who wins the White House. And in this upcoming midterm, women of color will determine who is the majority in the state house, governor, and in the Senate. And so those are the ways of thinking that make things possible. And as an entrepreneur, as a founder, I find myself like, if we can open our minds to this possibility, now all of a sudden we can see something else is there. And then an organization comes and says, we can help to make this country better in this way. We can bring more people in. We can help have tighter relationships between political relationships and other kind of relationships between different groups at a time we need them is more possible. And I think that's the spirit that I come into this year with. A lot is at stake, but a lot is still very possible. And I think right now, in terms of being a founder, like we did a listening session over 10 states, including California. We went and met with women of color, particularly in the Central Valley and in LA, but also in 10 other battleground states. This is what we heard. We're tired. And we don't know if voting is going to make a difference. And I have to make sure that people understand, actually, it's the biggest difference right now. And have people still believe in a system, even if people are feeling cynical or exhausted.
No, I think the "we're tired" does resonate with a lot of people. I think particularly after the pandemic and the disproportionate weight that women have shouldered, navigating through these spaces has been challenging. But I think just one plug, it was National Voter Registration Day this week. So if you're not registered to vote, you should go out and do so.
Yes.
Because it does matter. Check your vote. If you've moved or changed locations, please do things to register to vote. I think the idea of how do we kind of bridge and think about this at a societal level and kind of bringing those leadership skills of women and women of color to different spaces, I think is something that we can all take lessons from, and sort of that, digging deep and really persevering. Thank you. Jessica, let me turn to you now. In your career, you briefly mentioned that you've really navigated spaces that have been traditionally very male-dominated, right? Fintech and insurance, you sort of think of those as very male-dominated. How have you kind of honed your own leadership style when you look around and you have a lot of your counterparts or leaders around you are male? And how do you, as a woman, then sort of tap in and develop your own leadership style?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so glad you asked that, because it's something that didn't cross my mind often, but thinking back, that was so true. So I worked at this large financial institution for about 10 years, was promoted to an executive position and was leading special projects, identifying which other companies to buy. So what I am in charge of is I have 10 other senior VPs in my working group that I need to gather them every month and have them review the target companies. They're all men. So I will walk into the meeting, 10 other men, and I am an Asian woman. They will all be talking about sports. I remember one of the senior leader asked me, so Jessica, which sport do you follow? And I don't. So my answer is, the only sports I follow is the Real Housewives franchise. They did not get the joke at all. They had no idea what it is. So how did I go from there, somebody who's kind of being dismissed, to I got the comments like, I am timid, I'm too aggressive, like there is somehow a special spot that a woman can be successful and can act properly in their eyes. But how I overcame that is then I kind of went for another opportunity. I went to an innovation organization. I started this project, and every other month, I will go in front of all the C-level people and ask for funding. Did that for over 2 years, ended up spending $10 million on this. How did I do it? It's not a natural skill for me. I started watching a lot of TED Talks. And I would encourage you to search for a specific TED Talk that's by the producer of Finding Nemo. It's a movie filmmaker, and that's a fantastic TED Talk. And so I started to thinking more from a storytelling, like a movie kind of approach. I started to use, I remember in one of my presentations, I used Star Wars as my opening to kind of help them understand how Star Wars are kind of like Jedis. They are just looking for their place in this world. And that is the moment I started to finding the power of storytelling is I don't need to like sports, but I can still connect with these people. Even though they're men, they love sports. And being funny, try to insert a joke somewhere, also helps. The second thing I found, and this is after I had my startup, I was asked by my board members to speak at events like this. And there is one particular event, I got a lot of feedback. And the feedback is the audience were touched because they felt I was being vulnerable. I am not just sitting here being confident, I know what I'm doing. I am very honest with my struggles, even though I did not wake up crying every morning, but I do go to sleep thinking about my startup, and the first thought when I open my eyes is my startup. And sharing that, especially with people who have not tried entrepreneurship before, they think, oh, I thought of the Uber idea as well. How come I did not go after that? There is a gazillion steps between an idea to bring something into life. And so I think just being authentic, and this is my journey. I used to have to write scripts to like every presentation, starting from asking for funding in a financial institution, to now I can just talk because I have gone through fundraising. I pitched to 100 VCs. I've done all formats of pitches, from elevator pitch to 30 minutes to 1 hour to plug and play. They have this setup of a speed dating type of a pitches like you go through. So I think just practice, and there might be a different way of you that you can connect and influence others. And I think storytelling is a very, very powerful one.
Mm-hmm. I think certainly this idea of storytelling is really coming through from each of you about how do you really connect, whether it's a company or whether it's a pain point or whether it's sort of a societal challenge, and how do you then connect that to an organization or a business idea of how we're going to try to solve that, right? And so how do you understand and look around and say, who's my audience? How do I build that connection, right? Those bridges, because it's not just about having the best idea, it's about having an idea that resonates and that is compelling, right? And so I think practicing, finding the networks, the folks who are going to help you drive that forward is certainly sort of unlocking that key. That mystery.
It is. And there's a saying that I like for women in particular, and it's not boasting when it's based on fact. And we need to be better at telling our stories. Mm-hmm. But the pitches, the fundraising, I think it's very easy when you start out as a founder to underestimate the pressure, the relentlessness you have to have, the no's that you're going to hear again and again and again until it's a yes. Mm-hmm. And then you only need a few to get on your side, the right allies to join. But it is a constant honing. I'm on now, I think, version 68 of my pitch deck. And so you just have to go back and revise and revise and revise. And you get better and better at telling your story. Yeah. And it's a great thing whether you have a company or not, but to think about that elevator pitch. Mm-hmm. What is it that you're trying to convey? Where are you in your life? How do you do it in 30 seconds or under? And then encourage those around you to tell their stories as well. It's so much storytelling.
It's a lot of storytelling.
Yeah.
I was, I had most of my professional career without running my own organization, but working for other guys. And I had a lot of the messages that came from the ether and society or culture that were embedded. It was like I was carrying around for myself, like, who do you think you are? Who do you think you are? So storytelling is very important. Seeing people's important. Admitting when you don't know what you're doing is also, for women, there's a very liberating. Yeah. I advise a lot of candidates. I advise Senate, statewide, like Secretary of State or gubernatorial candidates, Senate candidates, and state legislative, statewide candidates. Here's the common element for women of color running these spaces. It's common. It doesn't matter. You can just think of like your most famous politician that's a woman of color right now. It's also with her. I'm learning to look at yourself from the eyes of someone who judges you and doesn't think you're worthy. Now, how do we overcome that in order to have the confidence to go forth and say this is a way it should be? I did the op-ed project. Has anyone done that? Women are the least represented on the opinion pages of like New York Times or you just name it, Politico or any of the places. Women are not published that often. And if you're on the op-ed pages, it opens up all kinds of influence, at least in my world, and probably your world too. If you're working for a company and you publish something in, I don't know, Fortune, Money, I don't know, some other magazine, crypto, finance, something, you have status. So it's something that the fact that we're underrepresented is important to note. So the op-ed project has a one-day training for women, how to get into opinion, how to get published. And they had us do an exercise. There was maybe 15 of us in the class. They had us do an exercise, and it said, introduce yourself and your area of expertise. And each person who introduced their area of expertise, it was like I introduced myself. I'm Amy Allison. I'm an expert in Oakland politics. I just told you who I advise. I'm an expert in Oakland politics. I live in Oakland. I'm an expert in national American politics. But I didn't claim it. And I was not that unusual. Every single woman said, they feel like they have to have a PhD plus an MBA plus 30 years of experience just to say. Now, guys are not saddled with this because they don't learn to judge themselves from the eyes of anyone who thinks they're not worthy. They just say, you know what? I know a little about it. Good enough. I'm going to write 700 words and get it in the Washington Post. And guess what? They may not get 100% of the time, but they get a lot of time.
They take the shot.
Yep. So we have to develop the capacity as women of color to diffuse the power of the voice that tells us that we're not worthy, who do we think we are, by learning to look at us from the eyes of someone who is for you, your people, 100%, no matter what. You're successful, you fall on your face, they're like cheering you on. You look at yourself in that way and you go for it and claim a very broad range of expertise, even the stuff that you think makes you seem like, somebody went to jail. Like my brother went to jail for 20 years. I thought, I'm very embarrassed with that. I don't want to explain that. But actually, having a sibling who has that experience qualifies me to be able to talk about what the criminal justice system does to families. So to claim expertise, no matter what your experience is the thing that prepares you to go on and found the thing and tell the story and claim it. And then you're not pulling on your hair and adjusting your clothes and wondering if your voice sounds good or wondering if you're good enough. Forget about that.
Statistic, we have over 5,000 years of recorded history. 0.5% of that has been dedicated to the stories of women. So we all here have to be a part of changing that.
Yeah. That is stunning when you think about it, but it's
a big motivator.
It is.
It shouldn't be, it's depressing, but it should be galvanizing.
Yep.
Same with companies. Many companies, including Alfie, born out of frustration that tools don't exist, that platforms don't exist, that communication tools don't exist, that are specifically targeted. at a certain problem, a pain point.
Yeah, I think like at this moment, I was still adjusting my hair and all that. And I found this, like, the stage to be slippery. But I'm still comfortable. I'm still comfortable. And I am comfortable because throughout this kind of journey of being a female entrepreneur, I know I can learn anything. I have, now I can speak to a technology like a software deck, like architecture very fluently. I can speak about crypto and blockchain very fluently. I can learn to pitch and I can learn to sell to Fortune 500 companies. And so just know that you're way awesome and more capable than you think you are. And if there's anything or any skill you don't have right now, you can absolutely learn it.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Well, before we open it up for audience questions, which I'm sure we have a few of, I'm just going to take the moderator's privilege and just say one thing we hear, and I think we've seen some, let's just say, stunning discrepancies in the expectations that women have in terms of how do we navigate failure, whether that's public or private. We often hear the term for male founders in particular to fail fast and to fail upward. But women can often look at failure as an albatross or as something that sort of stops us dead in our tracks. How do you persevere? You touched on this briefly, Julian. When you hear no, or when you kind of navigate through that adversity, is there any advice you have for the folks in the audience here or joining us online? What is some of that advice or those sort of mantras that you channel when you're really kind of navigating through those no's or having to revise your deck for the 60-something time? How do you kind of tap into, what do you tap into?
I had a lot of experience in rejection as an author. Even though I had a long career in journalism, when I went to sell books, I would get, we'd get 10 rejections first, and I'd think, oh my God, this is a terrible book. There's nothing redeeming about it. And then the 11th agent, or the 11th editor would be like, this is the best book I've ever read. I love it. You nailed the protagonist. It's so great. So that was the lesson. Okay, so you may go through 10 rejections and you're feeling very dispirited. And you also, there's a temptation to go back and revise what you've done. And basically the underlying story. And it's very similar in raising money for a company and selling a company and pitching to all of those you end up pitching to. You have to believe in the central storyline of what it is and hold on to that. Listen to everybody, listen to all the feedback, but hold on to what that storyline is. So I was very prepared for this tough road as being a founder through, again, continuum, through this experience I had as an author. And you have to believe in it and persevere with it. And I would also say that this is something that it takes a lot of stamina to do things that are really hard in life. So take care of yourself and believe in it. Take time for yourself. Be good to the people around you. And stamina. You have to take care of yourself. This is an arduous journey, but it is an incredible one of opportunity. It's not easy. It's not for the faint of heart, but it's just incredibly rewarding already where we are. To go from idea to product to something that's going to market that can impact people's lives in a positive way.
I just want to give, I know we're running at time here, but Jessica or Amy, any final words or advice that has really kind of guided you as a North Star?
Failure is part of success. Failure isn't the end of success. It is part of success. At my 20th reunion at Stanford, we organize, usually they'll have like a class panel, and then they'll have famous people, very successful, people like Cory Booker was in my class, okay? Sitting senator, it's like usually these folks who you look at them and you put them on a pedestal and you say, they're successful, they haven't failed. But if you like scratch the surface, you recognize that failure was it's certainly has been on my journey. I've failed a bunch of times. And the thing that is like getting okay with failure as just part of the process has helped me to become resilient. Like you didn't get the money this time, or they didn't like you this time. That's okay. That's okay. I'll just start again tomorrow. That's okay. And you got to develop that capacity in order to continue on the path.
Yeah, I think they both said so well about failure. I'll just leave you with a complete different thing. I often thought of this instead of, I have 2 kids, and my friends gave me wonderful baby showers. And I often thought of, what if we do new career or new business showers? When we have a friend, a colleague who's starting a new position, a new career, a new business, let's gather around and bring our resources to celebrate and to really help each other, right? I often thought of things in the world of business, there's so much about network, about resources. Let's do that for each other.
Yeah. Love it.
Well, I think that's very powerful, and let's try to channel that all in our personal networks as well. So thank you, each of you, for bringing your perspectives and your power of storytelling to us today. Thank you all so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Becca Killian, and I am the Event Marketing Manager and co-lead of the Women's Leadership Series. Today, we have all heard from some absolutely amazing women. I hope that as you are walking away from today's conference, you are feeling inspired, informed, and reinvigorated. And with that, I would now like to virtually turn it over to our CEO and incredibly supportive ally, Ahmad Thomas, for some closing remarks.
Thank you, Becca, and thank you to everyone who has joined us for the Women's Leadership Summit today. At SVLG, we're committed to ensuring that women are not just valued with equal pay for equal work, but also are driving leadership, innovation, and our service across all facets of the organization. I'm very sorry that I'm not able to join you in person, but as part of our broader commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and a new vision of Silicon Valley corporate leadership, I'm scheduled to be in Washington, D.C. for the White House Historically Black Colleges and Universities, HBCU conference. But I hope you've had a fulfilling and inspiring day. I'd like to thank our sponsor, Blue Shield of California, and our host, Palo Alto Networks, for helping us put together a great event. I'd also like to extend a special thank you to Shannon Diatley-Johnson and Becca Killian on our team, who put together our premier Summits Day with such authenticity, care, and dedication. This truly has come from the heart. Let me close by saying that I look forward to continuing these important dialogues around gender equality and diversity in the workplace and our communities. These are business issues, and they are fundamental to the competitiveness of our valley. We've made progress, but there's still much more work to be done to create a more equitable and inclusive future for Silicon Valley businesses and the innovation economy. Thank you very much for joining us here today.
Hi, everyone. If our SVLG women will come stage. There we go. Thank you.
Great.
Yes, probably, yeah.